You've been lied to about self-love. They told you it means pampering yourself with spa days, chasing validation from others, or repeating affirmations you don't even believe. But if that were true, why do so many people still feel unworthy when the lights go out at night? Why do you still feel that quiet ache inside the voice that whispers you're not enough, no matter what you do? The truth is, real self-love isn't about chasing perfection. It isn't about fixing yourself, because you were never broken to begin with. It's about remembering who you already are, gentle, whole, worthy of kindness. And Buddhism holds the blueprint. For centuries, monks and teachers have passed down lessons not about escaping life, but about embracing it with compassion, patience, and balance. These are not abstract ideas. They are practices that can soften the harshest self-critic, calm the restless mind, and open the heart to peace. Tonight, as you listen to these lessons, something inside you will begin to shift. The tension in your chest will loosen, the storm of self-judgment will grow quiet, and you'll feel a tenderness toward yourself, like sunlight touching a cold morning. This isn't just another bedtime story. It's an invitation to rest in your own love, to let go of the weight you've carried for too long, and to discover a gentleness that has always been waiting inside you. Are you ready? Let's begin. The search for peace within yourself doesn't end with soft words or a single night of comfort. The truth is, self-love isn't a single destination. It's a path you walk every day. And on this path, the first light that guides you comes from one of the most profound lessons Buddhism has ever offered, the middle way. Before you think this is just another phrase of philosophy, pause for a moment. Reflect on how much of your suffering has come not from what others do, but from how merciless you can be toward yourself. That inner voice that scolds you for every mistake, that punishes you for not being perfect, that makes rest feel like weakness. This is where the middle way becomes more than wisdom. It becomes survival. The middle path, taught by the Buddha after his own years of extremes, is not about living blandly in the middle of everything. It's about balance, the kind of balance that allows you to breathe without guilt, to rest without shame, to try again without being crushed by self-hatred. Think of it like walking across a rope bridge. On one side is indulgence, drowning in excuses, letting yourself collapse into laziness and endless distraction. On the other side is denial, beating yourself with impossible standards, starving joy out of your life to chase worthiness. Both sides lead to a fall, but steady steps in the middle bring you forward. This lesson matters because most of us are trapped on one side or the other. Some days you numb yourself with endless scrolling, eating more than your body needs, or avoiding responsibilities until shame swells in your chest. Other days you swing back with brutal discipline, cutting joy out of your life, demanding perfection, telling yourself you're not allowed to rest until you've earned it. And so the cycle continues, indulgence followed by punishment, relief followed by shame. No wonder your mind feels like a battlefield. The middle path teaches that healing doesn't come from swinging between extremes, but from stepping out of the fight entirely. When you stop chasing the illusion of a perfect self and stop drowning in the illusion of a hopeless self, you find a steadiness where both discipline and kindness can exist together. This steadiness is what softens self-criticism. It allows you to see that mistakes are not evidence of failure, they are part of being alive. And when you accept that truth, the urge to attack yourself begins to lose its grip. Think about the last time you were harsh with yourself. Maybe you said the wrong thing in a conversation and replayed it in your head for hours. Maybe you failed at a goal, and the only words in your mind were, "I'm useless. I'll never change." That voice feels like truth, but the Buddha would say, it's not truth, it's attachment to an extreme. You're clinging to the idea that worth comes only from flawless action. But if you look through the eyes of the middle path, you'll see that one mistake is not your identity, just as one success is not your essence. You are more than a single action, and you deserve compassion, no matter the outcome. Now let's break this down in practice. When self-criticism arises, the middle path asks you to pause. Don't drown the pain with indulgence. Don't run to distractions that numb the voice for a moment. And don't swing into denial. Don't whip yourself with mental punishment as if cruelty will force change. Instead, ask, what would balance look like right now? If you failed, balance may be acknowledging the failure honestly, but also reminding yourself that growth takes time. If you feel guilt, balance may be taking responsibility without dragging yourself through endless shame. If you feel tired, balance may be resting without labeling yourself as lazy. Balance is not weakness, it's wisdom. One way to practice this is through mindful awareness. When the harsh voice appears, don't try to silence it with fake positivity. Instead, observe it. See it as a storm passing through the sky of your mind. The middle path doesn't say storms will never come. It says you don't need to build your house inside the thunder. Step back, watch the thought, ask if it is true, if it is useful. Often, you'll realize it's neither. That awareness is the first step toward gentleness. Another layer of balance is how you set expectations for yourself. Many people confuse discipline with punishment, but discipline, in its true form, is a loving act. It's choosing what serves you, not beating yourself for what doesn't. When you work toward a goal with compassion, you still put in the effort, but you don't poison the journey with cruelty. You accept setbacks as part of the process instead of labeling yourself a failure. That shift transforms discipline into growth instead of self-destruction. Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh often spoke about watering the good seeds. Inside your mind, there are seeds of harshness, but also seeds of kindness, patience, and wisdom. Every time you choose balance instead of extremes, you water the seeds of kindness, and those seeds grow stronger. Over time, the harsh voice becomes quieter, not because it's silenced, but because compassion has grown louder. That is the power of the middle path. It doesn't demand perfection. It gently tilts your choices toward harmony. Let's take an example. You planned to wake up early and meditate, but you overslept. The self-critical voice says, "You're weak. You can't even control your mornings." Indulgence would say, "It doesn't matter. I'll just give up today and do nothing." But the middle path whispers something different. You missed the morning, but you can still take 5 minutes now. It doesn't erase the past, but it's still a step forward. That single step is balance. That single step is compassion. This way of living heals the nervous system, too. Studies show that harsh self-criticism activates the same stress responses as physical danger. Your heart races, your body tenses, cortisol floods your blood. It's as if your own mind has turned into an attacker. But when you practice balance, you signal safety to your body. You say, "I am not my enemy," and slowly, your nervous system begins to trust you again. Imagine what a gift that is to befriend yourself so deeply that even your body feels safe in your own presence. The middle path also teaches you to stop comparing. When you're stuck in extremes, you look at others and either condemn yourself for not being as good or dismiss them to protect your fragile worth. Balance releases both traps. You see others walking their own path, with their own mistakes, their own victories. You realize you're not behind, you're not ahead, you're simply walking. And walking with balance means you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone. A subtle but important part of this teaching is gentleness with time. In self-criticism, there's always urgency. I should already be there. I should already be better. But the middle path says growth is like a tree. You don't pull the branches to make it taller. You water it, you give it sunlight, and you trust the process. This doesn't mean you avoid effort. It means you replace harshness with patience, knowing every step matters, no matter how small. The beauty of balance is that it doesn't just reduce pain, it creates space for joy. When you stop swinging between indulgence and denial, you have energy left to notice the little things, the softness of your breath, the comfort of rest, the lightness of laughter. Self-criticism steals these moments by convincing you that you don't deserve them. Balance returns them, reminding you that joy is not a reward for perfection. It is part of being alive. So how do you walk this path daily? Start small. Notice the language you use with yourself. Replace "I always fail" with "This time didn't go as I hoped, but I can try again." Replace "I'm lazy" with "I need rest, and I'll return with energy." These aren't empty affirmations, they are balanced truths. They acknowledge the reality without collapsing into cruelty. You can also practice balance by treating your inner world as you would a friend. If a friend confessed they failed, would you call them worthless? No, you would remind them of their worth, encourage them to try again, and give them space to rest. The middle path invites you to extend that same friendship inward, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Another practice is pausing in moments of self-criticism. Before reacting, take a breath. Place your hand on your chest and ask, what would balance feel like right now? You might find the answer is to rest, or to continue with gentleness, or to simply sit and breathe. The question shifts you out of extremes and back into awareness. That single pause can change the entire tone of your day. Balance also teaches you to respect your limits. Harshness often comes from pushing beyond what your body and mind can bear. The middle path doesn't mean you never stretch yourself. It means you know when to stop before stretching becomes breaking. Respecting your limits isn't failure. It's wisdom that protects your energy for what truly matters. Over time, this way of living rewires the way you see yourself. Self-criticism stops being the loudest voice. It becomes just one thought among many, no longer your identity. Balance shows you that you are not the sum of mistakes or successes. You are the awareness that witnesses them, and that awareness is already whole, already worthy of love. As you let this truth settle, notice the shift. The old habits of self-attack will still appear, but you'll meet them differently. Instead of collapsing into indulgence or denial, you'll stand in balance. And in that balance, you'll feel the first taste of freedom, not the freedom of perfection, but the freedom of compassion. Balance shows you that you are not the sum of mistakes or successes. You are the awareness that witnesses them, and that awareness is already whole, already worthy of love. But even when we find this balance, the truth is that life still tests us. The harsh voice does not vanish overnight. Flaws still surface, frustrations still rise, and old habits still whisper in moments of weakness. What carries us through these tests is patience, the quiet strength that makes balance sustainable. Without patience, balance collapses under pressure. With patience, every challenge becomes softer, more human, less of an enemy. Patience, or khanti, is one of the 6 perfections in Buddhism. Many people misunderstand it as simply waiting without complaint, but in the Buddhist sense, it is far more profound. It is the ability to meet difficulty, insult, failure, and imperfection without bitterness. It is the softness that resists the urge to tighten into anger or collapse into shame. It is not passive endurance, but an active practice of gentleness in the face of discomfort. When you apply patience inward, it becomes a balm for self-criticism. Think of how often you have demanded instant change from yourself. You want to heal quickly, succeed quickly, transform quickly. And when growth doesn't happen overnight, the harsh voice returns, "You'll never change. You're weak." This impatience is what fuels self-judgment. The perfection of patience interrupts that cycle. It teaches you to trust the slow unfolding of your own life. A flower does not bloom because you shout at it. It opens when it is ready, and no sooner. The same is true for your healing. Patience toward yourself begins with accepting the pace of growth. Many people look at their struggles and expect a straight line of progress. But the truth is, growth is uneven. Some days you will feel full of clarity, and other days you will feel tangled in old habits. Patience is the wisdom that sees both as part of the journey. Instead of condemning yourself on the hard days, you can say, "This is also part of me learning." That shift changes everything. Instead of spiraling into shame, you allow the struggle to pass without judgment. This form of patience also means learning to stay present with discomfort. Often, the harsh voice arises because we cannot bear the sting of imperfection. The moment we make a mistake, we rush to punish ourselves, as if self-attack will somehow erase the discomfort. But Buddhist patience asks you to sit with that sting, to breathe with it, to let it exist without resistance. When you stop fighting discomfort, you realize it cannot destroy you. The pain of imperfection becomes lighter simply because you stop making war against it. Another dimension of patience is forgiveness of time already lost. Many people attack themselves for not starting sooner, for wasting years in patterns of avoidance or self-sabotage. They say, "If only I had learned earlier, I would be better by now." This is one of the harshest judgments because it holds you hostage to a past you cannot change. Patience teaches you to release that chain. The past unfolded as it did because that was the only way you could learn. Regret does not speed growth. Gentleness with your timeline does. When you accept that the past is unchangeable, your energy returns to the present, where transformation is still possible. Patience also applies to how you treat your flaws. Many people think flaws must be erased for self-love to exist, but patience says flaws can be held without panic. They are not permanent walls, but passing clouds. A tendency to overthink, a struggle with discipline, a fear of vulnerability, these do not define you. They are conditions of mind that can shift with time and practice. Patience allows you to hold flaws with kindness until they loosen naturally, rather than attacking yourself for not being rid of them instantly. This practice extends even to failure. When you fail, impatience tells you it is the end, proof of your unworthiness. Patience tells you it is only a moment, proof that you are human. Failure under patience becomes a teacher rather than a sentence. You begin to see that every mistake carries wisdom if you stay long enough to hear it. This does not mean you celebrate failure blindly, but that you refuse to turn it into a weapon against yourself. You say, "This hurts, but it will guide me forward," instead of, "This proves I am broken." Patience also transforms the way you respond to the voice of self-criticism itself. Instead of trying to silence it forcefully, you meet it with patience. You say, "I hear you, but I do not need to obey you right now." The voice may still speak, but patience allows you to wait for it to fade rather than reacting instantly. Over time, the voice loses power, not because it disappears, but because you no longer rush to believe it. This is how patience slowly untangles the cycle of self-attack. Scientific studies echo this truth. Neuroscience shows that when you meet discomfort with acceptance rather than resistance, your brain reduces its stress signals. Patience literally reshapes the way your nervous system reacts to difficulty. Instead of constant fight or flight, you shift into calm observation. Your body learns that it is safe to make mistakes, safe to rest, safe to be imperfect. The physiological calm reinforces the psychological calm, creating a cycle of healing instead of harm. To cultivate this kind of patience, small practices make a difference. When you feel the urge to rush, pause and take 3 slow breaths. When you feel the urge to insult yourself, place your hand over your heart and speak 1 kind sentence instead. These are not dramatic actions, but they are seeds of patience. Over weeks and months, they grow into a steadiness that no storm of judgment can uproot. Another practice is to honor small progress. Patience is not waiting for a perfect future. It is recognizing the value of every small step. When you catch yourself being gentler than yesterday, even in a tiny way, acknowledge it. That acknowledgement reinforces the truth that growth is happening, even if it feels invisible. This prevents the mind from collapsing into despair when big change takes longer than expected. Patience also requires releasing comparison. Nothing kills gentleness faster than measuring your growth against someone else's. Patience says, each person's path unfolds at its own pace, and your timeline cannot be measured by another's milestones. The bamboo and the oak tree both grow into their fullness, but they do so at different rhythms. If you demand to be an oak when you are bamboo, you will only suffer. Patience honors your own rhythm. On a deeper level, patience is an act of trust. Trust that life is unfolding in its own way, that your efforts matter even when results are unseen, that healing is possible even when invisible. Trust dissolves the frantic urgency that fuels self-criticism. Instead of saying, "I must fix this now," or "I am nothing," you say, "I will continue gently, and in time, change will come." That trust allows the heart to rest. This resting heart is not passive. Patience is not resignation. It does not mean you stop trying or give up responsibility. It means you act without the poison of urgency. You continue your practices, your efforts, your learning, but you do so with gentleness rather than violence. This is why Buddhist patience is called a perfection. It perfects not by removing effort, but by purifying it of cruelty. Over time, patience becomes a deep inner refuge. When criticism rises, when frustration builds, when flaws surface again, you no longer collapse into despair. You can rest in patience as if in a quiet room, knowing the storm will pass. That quiet room is within you always, available every time you choose not to rush your own becoming. Patience also shapes how you relate to your body. Many people punish their bodies with harsh diets, over-exercise, or neglect. Patience with the body means listening to its needs instead of forcing it into extremes. Rest when tired, nourish when hungry, move with care instead of punishment. This physical patience reinforces emotional patience, teaching you that care, not cruelty, leads to real change. Perhaps the greatest gift of patience is that it reconnects you with kindness. Self-criticism is always urgent, sharp, demanding. Patience is soft, steady, forgiving. When you choose patience, you choose kindness. And kindness toward yourself is the soil in which self-love finally grows strong. You begin to see that flaws are not failures, that time is not lost, that you are not behind. You are simply unfolding at your own pace, and that is enough. In the end, patience reveals something profound. The self you are so desperate to fix is not broken, it is simply unfinished, still forming, still becoming. And the only way to meet this unfinished self is with gentleness. Harshness cannot speed the process. Only patience can. Only patience has the power to hold your imperfections without fear, to let them soften naturally, to trust that beneath the layers of judgment there is already wholeness waiting to shine. With patience, self-love becomes less of a goal and more of a natural state. The harsh voice still speaks, but it no longer controls. The flaws still appear, but they no longer condemn. Time still passes, but it no longer threatens. Patience transforms your relationship with all of it, turning every moment, even the difficult ones, into an opportunity for gentleness. And as you walk this path, step by step, you realize the truth. You were never meant to perfect yourself in haste. You were meant to learn the art of waiting kindly for your own heart to open. Patience shows you that even the hardest struggles soften when you stop demanding instant perfection from yourself. It teaches you to stay steady through discomfort and to meet each flaw with gentleness rather than urgency. But if patience is the ground that steadies you, impermanence is the sky that opens above you. The Buddhist truth of anicca tells us that nothing in life, no pain, no failure, no label you give yourself, stays the same forever. Every thought, every emotion, every struggle is moving, shifting, dissolving. And this truth holds the key to freeing yourself from the heavy names you have carried for too long. So often, self-criticism begins with a label. You say to yourself, "I am a failure, I am broken, I am lazy, I am unworthy." These words sink into your identity as if they were carved into stone, but anicca says, there is no stone. There is only water, flowing and changing every moment. What feels fixed is in reality passing through you. The sadness that seems endless, the anger that feels like your nature, the shame that clings to every memory, none of these are permanent features of who you are. They are conditions that arise and fall away, like waves on the surface of the sea. This perspective transforms the way you see yourself. When you treat flaws as permanent, you cling to them as your identity. You say, "This is who I am, and it cannot change." That belief tightens into hopelessness. But when you see flaws as impermanent, they lose their power. You begin to say, "This is what I feel now, but it is not all of me. This is what I struggle with today, but it is not forever." That shift creates space for compassion, because you are no longer locked inside a rigid story. Embracing impermanence also helps you release the idea of being defined by the past. Many people carry old mistakes as lifelong names. A failure in school becomes, "I am stupid." A broken relationship becomes, "I am unlovable." A lost opportunity becomes, "I am hopeless." These names chain you to moments that no longer exist. But when you truly see impermanence, you understand that the past cannot define you because it no longer lives. Only the present moment is alive, and in this moment you are free to grow in a new direction. This does not mean you ignore the past. Impermanence does not erase what has happened, but it shows you that the meaning you attach to those events is not fixed. You can carry them as wounds or as teachers. You can use them as chains or as fuel. And because meaning itself is impermanent, you are free to choose again in every moment. Impermanence also shifts the way you meet emotions. Most people attack themselves for feeling sadness, anger, fear, or doubt. They say, "Why am I still feeling this? I should be over it." This harshness comes from believing emotions are permanent if they linger. But anicca teaches that emotions, no matter how heavy, are temporary guests. They may stay longer than you wish, but they do not stay forever. When you hold this truth, you can meet emotions with patience rather than panic. Instead of saying, "I will always feel this way," you say, "This is here now. and it will change. That single thought softens the weight of any feeling. On a deeper level, impermanence frees you from chasing perfection. When you believe identity is fixed, you strive to become some permanent version of yourself, always confident, always disciplined, always kind. And when you fall short, you attack yourself. But impermanence reveals that there is no permanent self to achieve. You are a living process, always becoming, never frozen in one form. The goal is not to lock yourself into perfection, but to flow gently with change. This understanding releases the pressure to arrive and allows you to rest in the truth that you are already whole in your constant becoming. This truth also touches how you meet success. Many people cling to achievements as proof of worth, then fear losing them because they believe without them they are nothing. But impermanence teaches that success is also passing. It can be celebrated, but it does not need to be clung to as identity. When success passes, your worth remains untouched. This wisdom prevents the crash of self-criticism that often follows when external accomplishments fade. The teaching of impermanence also reveals why comparison is a trap. When you compare yourself to someone else, you act as if their present state is permanent. You say, "They are better, I am worse," as if those roles could never change. But their life is also shifting, their strengths and struggles rising and falling like your own. When you see this, comparison dissolves, because you understand that everyone is in flux. No one is fixed above or below anyone else. One way to practice this teaching is through direct reflection. When a harsh thought arises, "I am worthless," pause and ask, "Has this thought always been here? Will it stay forever?" You will see that it came and it will go. This breaks the illusion of permanence. Another practice is noticing small changes in your daily life. The mood that seemed unbearable in the morning has softened by evening. The body that felt weak yesterday feels stronger today. The memory that once burned with shame now feels lighter. These shifts remind you daily that nothing in your experience defines you forever. Neuroscience aligns with this teaching. Research shows that the brain is plastic. It changes continuously throughout life. Even habits etched by years of repetition can be rewired with new practice. This means no flaw, no pattern, no self-label is unchangeable. The brain itself embodies anicca. When you remember this, you stop attacking yourself as if you are carved in stone. You begin to treat yourself as a living being capable of transformation. Impermanence also teaches humility. When you cling to positive labels, "I am always strong," "I am always wise," you set yourself up for shame when those qualities shift. By seeing even your strengths as impermanent, you can hold them with gratitude without fear of losing them. This humility makes you gentler because you no longer need to defend an image of permanent greatness. You allow yourself to be human, fluctuating, imperfect, yet still worthy. Perhaps the most healing part of impermanence is how it changes your relationship with brokenness. Many people believe they are fundamentally damaged, as if brokenness is the core of their being. But anicca shows that nothing is fixed, not even suffering. Pain arises, but it also passes. Patterns hold, but they also soften. Even the deepest wounds can change with time and care. When you see this truth, you stop calling yourself broken. You begin to say, "I am in a process of healing," which is a far more accurate description of the living reality. This truth doesn't mean everything will vanish easily. Some struggles return many times. But even then, impermanence teaches that their intensity, their form, their hold on you, these are always shifting. What feels unbearable today may feel lighter tomorrow, and one day may release entirely. Holding this truth keeps you from despair, because you know nothing, not even pain, is forever. Living with this awareness also deepens gratitude. When you recognize that moments, feelings, and even identities are impermanent, you learn to cherish them without clinging. A peaceful day is not dismissed as ordinary, it is honored, because you know it will pass. A difficult day is not condemned as endless, it is softened, because you know it will pass too. This balanced appreciation turns life itself into a teacher of gentleness. To truly embody impermanence, meditation is a powerful tool. Watching the breath rise and fall, you witness impermanence directly. Each inhale ends, each exhale ends, yet the flow continues. Watching thoughts appear and disappear, you see they cannot be held. This practice teaches you not just to believe in impermanence, but to feel it in your body and mind. With time, the habit of clinging loosens, and the grip of harsh labels weakens. Impermanence also protects you from despair when change feels slow. If you believe flaws are fixed, every setback feels eternal. But when you know change is constant, you trust that progress is happening even when unseen. Just as seasons shift quietly before they are visible, your growth is moving beneath the surface. This trust allows you to keep walking without collapsing into hopelessness. The heart of this teaching is liberation. You are not trapped in any identity, not failure, not brokenness, not even success. You are free to meet yourself freshly in every moment, because who you are is always shifting. When you hold yourself this way, harshness softens naturally. You no longer cling to insults as truth. You no longer cling to perfection as necessity. You simply live, breathing with the rhythm of change, meeting each rise and fall with compassion. This is how impermanence transforms self-love. It frees you from the prison of fixed labels and returns you to the truth. You are not your mistakes, not your past, not your fears. You are a process of becoming, flowing endlessly, and in that flow there is no brokenness, only change, only possibility, only life unfolding in its own time. Seeing that identity itself is never fixed, that every flaw and every struggle is subject to change, brings a great lightness to the heart. Impermanence loosens the grip of hopelessness and shows you that nothing about you is final. Yet, even with this freedom, there remains another obstacle, turning compassion outward while forgetting to turn it inward. Many people know how to care for others, how to show kindness, how to reach out with tenderness when a friend is hurting, but when it comes to their own suffering, they offer only silence, pressure, or neglect. This is where the profound teaching of bodhicitta becomes essential. Bodhicitta is the awakened mind, the deep intention to relieve the suffering of all beings. For centuries, it has been taught as the heart of the bodhisattva path, a force that transforms ordinary concern into boundless compassion. Yet in the rush to serve others, many forget that they too are beings, and their own pain deserves the same vow of care. To direct bodhicitta inward is not selfishness, it is integrity. If you exclude yourself from compassion, the vow is incomplete, and suffering continues in hidden ways. Think of the times you offered love to another person when they made mistakes. You told them it was okay, that they were human, that they deserved patience. Now recall the times you made mistakes yourself. Did you offer those same words? Or did you sharpen them into weapons and strike yourself with them? This double standard reveals how easily compassion is turned outward, while self-neglect is allowed to remain inside. The practice of inward bodhicitta is about healing that split, about recognizing that your suffering is not less worthy of compassion than anyone else's. The first step in directing bodhicitta inward is honesty. Many people deny their pain because they believe it is unworthy compared to the suffering of others. They say, What I feel doesn't matter. Others have it worse. While humility is valuable, this form of denial is not humility, but abandonment. Your pain may not look like someone else's, but it is still pain, and if ignored, it festers. Compassion begins by admitting that what you carry matters, that the weight on your chest deserves to be lifted. When you allow this truth, you open the door to kindness that includes yourself. Another layer is recognizing the cycles of self-neglect. Often, people repeat the same patterns of ignoring their needs, pushing themselves until exhaustion, or silencing their own emotions. These cycles continue because there is no inward bodhicitta to interrupt them. Outwardly, you may serve others, but inwardly you leave yourself unprotected. To awaken bodhicitta inwardly is to take the same vow for yourself that you would for the world. May I be free from suffering. May I find peace. Saying these words for yourself is not arrogance, it is justice. Once you begin to hold that vow, the way you respond to suffering changes. Instead of meeting your pain with blame, you meet it with tenderness. When loneliness rises, instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this way, you say, this is suffering and I deserve comfort. When fear rises, instead of saying, I am weak, you say, this is suffering and I deserve safety. These simple shifts turn the harshness of self-criticism into the warmth of compassion. They are not grand gestures, but they are profound, because they reverse the habit of abandonment. Directing bodhicitta inward also transforms the way you rest. Many people deny themselves rest, believing it is indulgence. But when you see rest through the eyes of compassion, it becomes an act of care. You do not rest because you are lazy. You rest because you are a being who suffers and deserves relief. This perspective lifts rest from guilt and places it within the vow of compassion. In this way, even the smallest act of care becomes sacred. The practice extends further into how you handle mistakes. Without inward compassion, mistakes become fuel for attack. But bodhicitta sees mistakes differently, not as evidence of failure, but as suffering that deserves kindness. When you treat your own errors with compassion, you learn more quickly, because your energy is not wasted in shame. You become more consistent, because self-care replaces self-punishment as the engine of growth. And you heal faster, because wounds close under gentleness, not cruelty. On a spiritual level, directing bodhicitta inward completes the circle of compassion. If you exclude yourself, your vow to relieve suffering remains partial, and the division weakens your heart. But when you include yourself, compassion becomes whole. This wholeness is powerful because it removes the hidden resentment that often arises when you give endlessly to others without replenishing yourself. By caring for yourself, you ensure that your compassion for others is authentic, not strained by self-neglect. Scientific studies show that self-compassion reduces anxiety and depression while increasing resilience. The brain responds to inward kindness with the same healing signals that come from being nurtured by another. Inward bodhicitta harnesses this truth. It is not empty words, but a real medicine for the nervous system. Each time you turn compassion inward, you train your mind and body to trust themselves again, to feel safe in their own presence. To cultivate this practice, meditation on loving kindness can be adapted. Traditionally, phrases like, "May you be safe," "May you be happy," are directed toward others. Inward bodhicitta invites you to speak those same phrases to yourself, sincerely, as if addressing a dear friend. At first it may feel unnatural, because the habit of harshness is strong, but with time, the heart learns to accept its own vow. This is how the neglected inner child begins to heal, not through force, but through steady, unconditional compassion. Another practice is journaling with compassion. Instead of recording only goals or complaints, write to yourself as you would to someone you care for deeply. Acknowledge your struggles without judgment. Offer words of support. Remind yourself of your worth. This creates a written dialogue of bodhicitta, directed inward, a tangible proof that you are included in the circle of care. The fruits of this practice are subtle but immense. You begin to notice less fear of failure because compassion is waiting no matter the outcome. You notice more willingness to try because you know mistakes will not be punished. You notice greater peace in daily life because suffering is no longer met with silence but with gentle response. These shifts accumulate until one day you realize that you no longer abandon yourself. Perhaps the deepest teaching is this: when you relieve your own suffering with compassion, you do not withdraw from the world, you join it more fully. A person who is harsh with themselves cannot offer true compassion without strain, but a person who has learned inward bodhicitta becomes a living example of gentle strength, a presence that heals by being whole. This is why directing bodhicitta inward is not a distraction from the path, but the heart of it. Only when you care for yourself can your vow to care for all beings shine with complete integrity. To walk this path is to stop treating your own suffering as an afterthought. It is to say, with the same sincerity you would say for anyone else, "May I be free." And with those words, repeated daily, you untangle the cycles of neglect, soften the harsh voice, and return home to yourself with kindness that does not waver. This is bodhicitta alive within you, not only for others but for the being you wake up with each day yourself. When compassion is finally allowed to flow inward, the heart discovers it has been carrying someone in silence all along, the younger self who first learned shame, who first felt neglected, who still waits in the shadows of memory for tenderness that never came. Directing bodhicitta inward opens the door to this forgotten child, but stepping through requires more than good intentions. It calls for a practice structured enough to hold such delicate wounds with care. This is where metta bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness, becomes a sacred path of healing. Loving kindness is often practiced by extending goodwill toward others, friends, strangers, even enemies. But few realize the deepest transformation occurs when these blessings are directed to oneself, not only the present self, but also the past selves who carry unhealed pain. The inner child, whether seen as literal childhood or the fragile parts of memory, holds experiences that shaped harsh beliefs. I am not enough. I am unwanted. I am broken. These are not truths, but impressions left by moments of hurt. If left untouched, they echo into adulthood as self-criticism and neglect. Metta bhavana offers a way to reach back through time, to cradle those versions of yourself in kindness, and to rewrite the way memory is carried. The first step is acknowledgement. Many people resist looking at the child within because they fear the pain that might rise. They push away the memory of being mocked, abandoned, overlooked, or dismissed. Yet avoidance only strengthens the wound, allowing it to dictate present life in hidden ways. To practice loving kindness toward the inner child, you begin by admitting their existence. You say inwardly, "Yes, you are here. Yes, I see you." This simple recognition dissolves years of silence, because neglect is often more painful than the original hurt. Once acknowledgement opens the door, kindness must follow. In meditation, you visualize that younger version of yourself, perhaps as a small child, perhaps as a teenager, and you send them phrases of love. May you be safe. May you be loved. May you be free from pain. At first, these words may feel mechanical, especially if self-criticism has hardened your heart. But repetition softens resistance. Over time, the younger self begins to receive what was once denied, the steady assurance of care. This practice reshapes the nervous system. Neuroscience shows that the brain does not fully distinguish between present and vividly recalled experiences. When you send loving kindness to your inner child, the brain responds as if kindness were truly being given in that moment of the past. Old memories, once charged with shame, begin to pair with new emotions of safety. This is not erasure, but transformation. The memory remains, but its sting lessens, its grip loosens, because compassion has been woven into its fabric. Metta Bhavana also teaches consistency. Pain from the past is not healed in a single session. Just as a child needs ongoing love, your inner child needs repeated reassurance. Each time you return to the meditation, you lay down another layer of safety. Slowly, the child who once felt abandoned begins to trust that they are no longer alone. This trust changes the present self as well, because the foundation of identity becomes rooted not in neglect, but in care. Directing loving kindness to the inner child also changes how you respond to triggers in daily life. Often, anger or fear in adulthood arises from echoes of childhood wounds. A harsh comment from someone today may awaken the memory of being ridiculed years ago. Without awareness, you react as if the old pain is happening again. But when you have practiced Metta Bhavana, you recognize the child behind the reaction. Instead of punishing yourself for being too sensitive or too weak, you pause and offer kindness to that younger self. This breaks the cycle of self-attack and replaces it with healing presence. The practice also brings gentleness to unmet needs. Many adults still carry cravings for validation, security, or affection that were not met in childhood. Without awareness, these cravings can drive harmful behaviors, seeking approval at all costs, overworking to prove worth, numbing loneliness through distractions. Metta Bhavana addresses these needs directly by sending love to the child who first felt deprived. By telling that younger self, "You are enough, you are safe, you are loved," you begin to meet the unmet needs from within, rather than endlessly searching outside. This inner dialogue fosters reconciliation. Often, people hold anger toward their younger selves, blaming them for mistakes or vulnerability. They say, "I was so stupid, I was so weak." But when you practice loving kindness toward that child, you realize they did the best they could with what they had. You see their innocence, their longing to be loved, their confusion in a world that was often harsh. Anger dissolves into empathy, and empathy becomes peace. Metta Bhavana also reveals hidden strengths. When you revisit your younger self with compassion, you see not only their pain, but also their resilience. You notice how they survived circumstances that felt unbearable, how they found small joys despite difficulty, how they carried you to this present moment. This recognition transforms shame into gratitude. Instead of rejecting your younger self, you begin to bow to them with respect, acknowledging their courage. On a spiritual level, directing loving kindness to the inner child heals fragmentation. Many people live divided, rejecting parts of themselves they associate with weakness or shame. But meditation that includes the inner child reunites these divisions. You gather all versions of yourself, past and present, into the circle of compassion. The heart becomes whole, no longer split between acceptance and rejection. This wholeness is the ground of true self-love. To deepen the practice, you can expand the meditation beyond visualization. Place your hand gently over your heart as you speak phrases of loving kindness. This physical gesture anchors the words in the body, sending signals of safety through touch. You may also bring in objects from childhood, a photo, a toy, and place them nearby during meditation. These objects act as bridges, allowing compassion to flow more vividly toward the younger self. Journaling can also support the process. Write letters to your inner child, acknowledging their fears, validating their feelings, offering words of love. Over time, these letters become a record of healing, a reminder that you have shown up consistently for the parts of yourself once left behind. Metta bhavana toward the inner child is not about denying pain, but about transforming its meaning. Where once memory held only loneliness, now it holds companionship. Where once it whispered rejection, now it echoes love. This transformation ripples outward. When you learn to care for your inner child, you naturally extend deeper compassion to others, because you understand what neglected pain feels like. You know how vital kindness is, and you offer it more freely. The greatest gift of this practice is freedom from cycles of self-criticism rooted in childhood wounds. When the inner child feels loved, the adult self no longer needs to prove worth through perfection or deny pain through harshness. The energy once spent on self-attack becomes available for growth, joy, and genuine connection. Life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a gentle unfolding. With time, loving kindness toward the inner child becomes second nature. When difficulty arises, you instinctively turn inward with care rather than cruelty. You recognize that every painful moment is not just an obstacle, but an opportunity to cradle the child within once more. And each time you do, the bond strengthens, the wound softens, and self-love deepens into something unshakable. This is the gift of metta bhavana directed inward, the ability to reach across years of silence, to take the hand of the younger self, and to walk together in kindness. In this union, the cycle of neglect ends. The past is not erased but healed. The present is softened with compassion, and the future is freed from carrying the same old burdens. You no longer live divided against yourself. You live as one being, whole, cherished, and worthy of love. When the inner child is finally met with kindness, the sharp edges of old memories begin to soften. What once felt like proof of brokenness is now held in compassion, and the weight of self-neglect grows lighter. Yet beneath these layers of healing, another challenge lingers silently, the constant pressure to become someone flawless. No matter how much love you offer to past wounds, the present mind often insists that only a perfect self will ever be worthy. This is where the teaching of shunyata, or emptiness, cuts through illusion with liberating clarity. Emptiness does not mean nothingness. It means that all things, including the self you chase, are empty of inherent, fixed existence. Every label you cling to, every standard you punish yourself with, every image of perfection you try to embody, they are not solid truths. They are constructions woven from thoughts, culture, memory, and comparison. When you realize this, the pressure begins to dissolve. The perfect self you chase is not a real entity waiting somewhere ahead. It is a mirage, and no amount of striving will quench the thirst it creates. Much of self-criticism is fueled by this illusion. You see an ideal in your mind, always confident, always productive, always kind, and you measure yourself against it. Every time you fall short, you attack yourself. Believing the gap proves failure. But shunyata reveals there is no solid self to measure against. The ideal exists only as a mental construction, not as an eternal standard written into the fabric of reality. To understand this deeply is to free yourself from the endless comparison between who you are and who you think you should be. This truth also dismantles the fear of being permanently flawed. Just as the perfect self is empty, so too is the broken self. When you call yourself a failure or a disappointment, you treat those labels as permanent identities. But emptiness shows they are also constructs, arising from conditions, dissolving with conditions. You are neither fixed as perfect nor fixed as broken. You are a process, a flow, a collection of shifting experiences that cannot be pinned down into one final definition. Seeing emptiness in this way changes the very ground of self-expectations. Instead of pushing yourself to embody an impossible image, you begin to see that growth is not about becoming perfect, but about letting go of illusions. This letting go is not passive, it is an active release of false burdens. When the pressure of perfection falls away, energy is freed for authentic care, creativity, and presence. You stop chasing the shadow of an unreal self and begin living the life that is actually here. This understanding also dissolves the comparison trap. Much of perfectionism comes from looking at others and believing they have reached a solid state you lack. But if all selves are empty, then their identities, too, are not fixed. The person you envy is also a process, also shifting, also carrying unseen struggles. When you see this, comparison loses its power. There is no permanent hierarchy, no final scoreboard. There are only beings unfolding in their own way, none more or less real than another. Emptiness also brings relief from shame. Shame thrives on the belief that flaws define the core of who you are. But if self has no inherent core, then shame has nothing solid to cling to. Flaws are conditions, not identity. They arise, they pass, they shape experience, but they do not define an eternal essence. This perspective allows you to hold mistakes lightly. You can acknowledge them without collapsing into self-condemnation, because you know they do not mark you forever. To live this teaching, reflection is key. When self-critical thoughts arise, I should be better, I should be perfect, pause and ask, what is this self I am comparing to? Where is it located? Can I touch it, see it, find it? If you look honestly, you discover there is no fixed self hiding anywhere. There are only thoughts, memories, expectations, and sensations, constantly changing. The self you attack is an idea, not an unshakable truth. Recognizing this loosens its hold. Meditation on emptiness deepens this insight. As you observe the body, you see it is not one solid thing but a collection of parts, bones, organs, breath, sensations constantly changing. As you observe the mind, you see it is not one solid self, but a stream of thoughts, images, emotions arising and dissolving. Where, then, is the permanent self that must be perfect? It cannot be found, because it does not exist. Realizing this is not despairing, it is liberating, because the weight of impossible standards collapses when the one who must carry them is revealed to be empty. This insight also transforms discipline. Many people treat discipline as a way to sculpt the perfect self, using effort as a weapon. But when you see emptiness, discipline shifts. You still practice, still grow, still aim for kindness and clarity, but without the burden of constructing a flawless identity. Effort becomes play rather than punishment, a way to explore possibilities rather than prove worth. This shift makes growth sustainable because it is rooted in curiosity rather than self-attack. Science offers parallels here. Research on self-concept shows that identity is highly fluid, shaped by context, environment, and memory. Who you believe yourself to be changes depending on mood, social setting, even time of day. Modern psychology echoes the Buddhist truth. There is no fixed self. To take yourself as a rigid entity is to fight against the reality of constant change. By accepting fluidity, you align with how the mind and body truly function, which reduces inner conflict. Emptiness also nurtures compassion for others. When you see that your own perfectionism is fueled by chasing illusions, you realize others suffer the same way. The colleague obsessed with success, the friend consumed by self-doubt, the stranger striving for validation, all are caught in the same trap of mistaking illusions for truth. This recognition softens judgment and replaces it with empathy. You see not competitors, not enemies, but fellow beings struggling under the same weight of expectation. Another gift of shunyata is humility. When you believe in a perfect self, you cling to superiority when you succeed and collapse into inferiority when you fail. Emptiness dissolves both extremes. Success is not proof of a solid, superior self. Failure is not proof of a solid, inferior self. Both are conditions arising and passing. This humility steadies the heart, keeping you balanced regardless of outcome. Practicing this truth also reshapes how you set goals. Instead of striving to create a flawless identity, you set goals as temporary steps, useful but not defining. You pursue health, learning, creativity, not because they will make you perfect, but because they bring balance and joy in the present. When goals are no longer tied to identity, failure loses its sting, because it does not threaten your worth. Success loses its pressure, because it does not need to be permanent. Goals become tools, not prisons. On a deeper spiritual level, emptiness points to freedom from clinging altogether. When you stop clinging to the illusion of a perfect self, you also stop clinging to the illusion of being broken. Both dissolve into the same truth. There is no fixed self to defend or condemn. What remains is openness, a spacious awareness that can hold all experiences without fear. This spaciousness is not empty in a cold sense. It is full of possibility, full of room for compassion, joy, and peace. Daily life offers countless opportunities to practice this. When you feel the urge to push yourself into perfection, pause and remind yourself, this self I am chasing is not real. When you feel the weight of self-condemnation, pause and remind yourself, this broken self is not real either. In both moments, return to the truth of emptiness and let the pressure ease. With time, this becomes a natural habit, a gentle release woven into the rhythm of living. The beauty of shunyata is that it removes the very foundation of self-attack. If there is no fixed self to perfect, then the game of harsh expectations loses its ground. You are free, not because you have become flawless, but because you no longer need to. You are free because the burden of defending or condemning an illusion has fallen away. In this freedom, self-love takes on a new depth. It is no longer about liking every part of yourself or meeting every goal. It is about resting in the spacious awareness that sees all of it, success, failure, kindness, anger, as passing conditions within emptiness. From this view, love arises naturally, not as a reward, but as the natural warmth of an open heart. This is the lesson of shunyata for self-expectations. The perfect self is empty, the broken self is empty, and in seeing this, you no longer need to live chained to illusions. You live as a process, free to grow, free to stumble, free to be. And in that freedom, the pressure fades, and the simple truth shines. You were never required to be perfect in order to be worthy of love. When the illusion of a perfect self is released, what remains is space wide, open, unpressured space where the heart can rest. Yet freedom is not only about what we let go of, it is also about how we nurture what is here. Without the need to prove worth or defend against judgment, the simplest acts take on profound meaning. And among these acts, none is more intimate, more constant, and more available than the breath. To treat breathing not as a background function, but as a daily love letter, is to transform life itself into a practice of self-care. Breath is the one companion that has never abandoned you. It was there at your first cry, and will remain until your last sigh. Yet most of the time, it goes unnoticed, hidden beneath the noise of thought and distraction. When you choose to notice it, to rest with it, to treat it as a gesture of kindness, you begin to reshape your relationship with yourself in a way that no external effort can match. The breath becomes both anchor and message. You are alive, you are worthy, you are cared for. Mindful breathing is not about controlling the breath, forcing it into rhythm, or chasing relaxation. It is about being present with what is already given. Each inhale arrives without demand. Each exhale releases without condition. To rest your attention on this cycle is to remember that care does not need to be earned. It is woven into existence itself. Breathing, when seen this way, becomes a constant reminder that you are allowed to be, without striving to be more. This practice changes the nervous system profoundly. When attention rests gently on the breath, stress responses quiet, heart rate steadies, and tension eases. The body receives a signal of safety, as if being held in steady arms. For someone who has lived with self-criticism as an inner attacker, this experience is revolutionary. Instead of bracing against inner violence, the body learns that presence itself is kindness. Breath is not simply air, it becomes medicine. To treat breathing as a love letter is also to infuse it with intention. As you inhale, you may silently say, "I welcome care." As you exhale, you may say, "I release harshness." These phrases are not rules but gentle companions, helping the mind rest in compassion rather than criticism. Over time, the repetition becomes natural, and every breath carries the message of self-love without effort. This practice also reconnects you with your body. Many who struggle with self-criticism become estranged from their physical form, treating it as a burden or a battlefield. By resting with the breath, you bridge the gap between mind and body. You feel the chest rising, the air flowing, the belly expanding. This simple noticing restores intimacy with yourself. Instead of living only in thoughts of inadequacy, you return to the living truth. Your body is here, breathing, keeping you alive, deserving of gratitude. Mindful breathing also reveals impermanence in a gentle way. Each inhale arises, each exhale passes, none can be held. To witness this flow daily is to internalize the lesson that nothing stays fixed, not breath, not thought, not pain. This realization nurtures patience with struggles. Just as you trust that an exhale will follow every inhale, you begin to trust that moments of suffering will also pass. Breath becomes a teacher of endurance and hope. Another layer of this practice is its accessibility. Unlike formal rituals or complex philosophies, breath is always available. In the middle of stress at work, in the quiet of night, in the rush of daily tasks, you can pause for one slow inhale and exhale. This pause is not trivial. It is a reminder, right in the middle of chaos, that you are still here and still deserving of care. Each time you return to the breath, you strengthen the habit of self-kindness. Treating breath as a love letter also helps dissolve the sense of loneliness. Often, people feel abandoned when love from others is absent or inconsistent. But when you anchor in mindful breathing, you realize you are never truly without company. Breath is a companion, steady and reliable, reminding you that care is present even when no one else is. This recognition reduces dependence on external validation and deepens inner trust. This practice can be expanded by combining it with visualization. As you inhale, picture the breath as light filling your chest, warming and soothing. As you exhale, picture that light spreading through your body, easing tension, healing wounds. This imagery is not fantasy. It directs attention toward sensations of warmth and release, reinforcing the emotional message of care. Over time, this creates an embodied sense of being held, not by another, but by your own awareness. Mindful breathing also transforms rest. Often, people fall into sleep with a racing mind, filled with criticism and worry. By resting attention on the breath as they lie down, they replace self-attack with self-compassion. Each exhale becomes a release of the day's burdens. Each inhale becomes a welcome of peace. This practice not only calms the mind, but also reframes rest itself as an act of love rather than laziness. Breath meditation is also a way to practice forgiveness. With every exhale, you can release the judgments you held against yourself that day. With every inhale, you can invite the intention to begin again. This rhythm mirrors the truth of renewal. No matter how harshly you treated yourself before, this breath is fresh, unmarked, and open to kindness. Forgiveness, then, is not an abstract concept, but a lived experience in the body. Scientific studies confirm the power of breath-focused practice. Regular mindful breathing lowers cortisol, improves emotional regulation, and increases resilience against stress. But beyond these measurable benefits lies something deeper: the emotional experience of being cared for from within. This is what makes treating breath as a love letter unique. It is not just technique, it is relationship between you and your own being, renewed with every cycle of inhale and exhale. Over time, this relationship changes how you meet difficulty. Instead of collapsing into panic, you pause to breathe. Instead of drowning in shame, you exhale it softly. Instead of rushing to fix yourself, you let the breath remind you that presence itself is enough. Challenges still arise, but they no longer dominate, because the rhythm of care is stronger. To anchor this practice more deeply, you can create small rituals. Begin your day with 3 intentional breaths, dedicating them as acts of kindness toward yourself. Pause midday for a minute of mindful breathing to reset. These rituals weave compassion into the structure of daily life, making self-love not an abstract idea, but a lived rhythm. One of the most profound aspects of this practice is its humility. Breath is simple, ordinary, often overlooked, yet it holds the power to transform suffering into gentleness. In honoring breath, you honor life itself, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet willingness to be present. This humility makes the practice sustainable, because it asks nothing extraordinary, only awareness of what is already here. Ultimately, treating each breath as a love letter teaches you that care does not need to be earned through perfection or achievement. It is given freely, with every inhale and exhale. You learn that love is not a rare gift reserved for flawless moments, but the steady pulse of life itself. And when you align with this truth, self-criticism loses its grip, because every breath contradicts its message. Where harshness says, "You are unworthy," breath answers, "You are alive, and that is enough." This is the heart of mindful breathing, not escape, not control, but intimate care. Each cycle becomes a reminder that you belong to yourself, that kindness is always within reach, that healing is carried on the air you breathe. To live this way is to transform the ordinary into the sacred, to turn the rhythm of breath into the rhythm of self-love. And in that rhythm, you find not only peace but also the quiet joy of knowing you were never truly without love. It was flowing in and out of you all along. Breathing as an act of love shows you that care can be as close as the rise and fall of your chest. Each inhale reminds you that you are alive. Each exhale proves you are capable of letting go. But once the mind grows quiet enough to listen, something else becomes clear. Pain is still there. Sorrow, disappointment, frustration, fear. They do not vanish simply because you breathe with kindness. The next step is learning how to meet these experiences without turning them into enemies. This is where the wisdom of dukkha begins to unfold. Dukkha is often translated as suffering, but it carries a deeper meaning. It points to the unsatisfactory nature of life, the friction that arises when things do not go as we expect, the ache of impermanence, the sting of unmet desires. Most people resist this truth. They fight pain, deny discomfort, or treat suffering as proof that something is wrong with them. But Buddhism teaches a different view. Dukkha is not a punishment. It is a teacher. If you learn to listen, it shows you the way to heal. The mistake many make is to see suffering only as an obstacle to happiness. When things fall apart, the first instinct is often blaming yourself, blaming others, blaming life. Yet blame never heals. It only tightens the wound. When you begin to see dukkha as a messenger instead of an enemy, you shift from resistance to curiosity. You ask, what is this pain trying to tell me? That single question turns suffering from a wall into a doorway. One of the first lessons dukkha offers is humility. Pain strips away the illusion of control, reminding you that life cannot always be shaped to your liking. This truth is difficult but liberating. When you stop expecting life to fit a rigid script, you become softer with yourself. You realize it is not failure to feel pain, it is part of being human. In this way, dukkha teaches acceptance. It shows you that suffering is not a mark of weakness, but a shared condition of existence. Another lesson is clarity. When you experience suffering, it reveals what you value most. The ache of loneliness shows your need for connection. The frustration of failure shows your desire to grow. The grief of loss shows your capacity to love. Without these moments of pain, you might not recognize what truly matters. Dukkha, when approached with gentleness, becomes a mirror that reflects the heart's deepest longings. Dukkha also teaches the limits of harshness. Many respond to suffering by attacking themselves, believing punishment will create change. Yet over time, self-punishment only deepens despair. The lesson here is that cruelty cannot lead to healing. When suffering lingers despite years of self-criticism, the truth becomes undeniable. What is needed is kindness, not punishment. In this way, dukkha gently exposes the futility of harshness and invites a new approach. Embracing suffering as a teacher also means sitting with it rather than fleeing. This does not mean clinging to pain or glorifying it, but allowing it to be present without immediate reaction. When you sit quietly with discomfort, you notice its texture, its rise and fall, its impermanence. You see that even the sharpest ache changes moment to moment. This observation dissolves the belief that suffering is eternal. It becomes another experience, moving through you rather than defining you. The practice of mindfulness supports this shift. Instead of drowning in the story around suffering, "This always happens to me, I'll never be okay," you return to direct experience. You notice the tightness in the chest, the heat in the face, the heaviness in the limbs. By observing without judgment, you step out of the spiral of blame and into the reality of sensation. This perspective reveals that pain is not as solid as it feels. It is a process that can be witnessed and understood. On a practical level, dukkha teaches balance. Suffering often signals where balance has been lost. Exhaustion reveals overwork. Conflict reveals disconnection. Anxiety reveals unmet needs for safety. If you treat these signals as enemies, you miss the chance to restore harmony. But if you listen, suffering becomes guidance. It points you toward the areas of life that need care. This way, even discomfort becomes a path to gentleness. Scientific understanding aligns with this teaching. Psychology shows that avoidance of pain strengthens it, while acceptance reduces its hold. When you resist suffering, stress increases, and the mind becomes trapped in fear. But when you turn toward suffering with openness, the brain processes it more effectively, and resilience grows. What Buddhism called the wisdom of dukkha centuries ago, science now affirms. Pain loses power when it is met with awareness and compassion. Another valuable lesson from dukkha is empathy. When you truly face your own suffering, you begin to recognize it in others. Instead of judgment, you feel kinship. You see that everyone carries burdens, even if they are hidden. This recognition makes you gentler, less quick to condemn, more willing to extend kindness. Suffering, when embraced as teacher, becomes a bridge of connection. Dukkha also teaches impermanence more directly than any philosophy could. The grief that feels unbearable eventually shifts. The failure that seems final eventually fades. The fear that grips you eventually loosens. Each experience of suffering carries within it the lesson that nothing lasts. By witnessing this truth repeatedly, you develop patience. You no longer rush to escape pain because you trust it will move on its own. Yet another lesson is resilience. Each time you survive suffering, you prove your strength. This does not mean you seek pain, but that you honor your endurance. Instead of labeling yourself as broken, you begin to see yourself as capable of rising again. Resilience is not about never falling, but about discovering that falling does not end you. Dukkha, paradoxically, is the teacher of strength. To integrate these lessons, practical exercises help. When suffering arises, pause and name it gently. This is grief. This is fear. This is anger. Naming shifts the mind from identification to observation. Next, ask what the suffering is pointing to. What does this reveal about my needs, my values, my heart? Finally, offer compassion. May I hold this with kindness? May I learn from this? This three-step process turns dukkha into a teacher rather than a tyrant. Over time, this practice changes your relationship with life itself. Instead of fearing suffering as proof of failure, you meet it as part of the path. You no longer need to run from discomfort or drown in self-blame. You see suffering as a visitor, bringing messages of humility, clarity, empathy, balance, and resilience. With this perspective, life feels less like a battle and more like a classroom of the heart. Ultimately, the greatest lesson dukkha teaches is love. Not the sentimental love of fleeting comfort, but the grounded love that arises when you refuse to abandon yourself in pain. When you hold your suffering with gentleness, you prove to yourself that you are worthy of care, even in the darkest moments. This truth changes everything, because once you learn to love yourself in suffering, you are no longer afraid of it, and without fear, you are free to live fully, to open your heart, and to walk gently on the path of self-love. Learning to sit with suffering without making it an enemy teaches you that pain does not diminish your worth. It guides you back to yourself with deeper wisdom. But once suffering has softened and its lessons are received, another practice must grow alongside it, one that often feels just as unfamiliar. The ability to rejoice in your own light. For many, it is easier to carry sorrow than to celebrate small victories, easier to mourn flaws than to honor growth. This is where the practice of mudita, sympathetic joy, becomes a path of healing. Mudita is traditionally described as the joy you feel for the success of others. It is the opposite of envy, the ability to celebrate another's happiness without comparison or bitterness. Yet the same practice can be directed inward. To rejoice in your own achievements, no matter how small, is to replace the habit of dismissal with recognition. It is to say, "This matters. I matter." For someone used to harsh self-criticism, this practice feels radical because it contradicts the inner voice that says nothing you do is ever enough. The first barrier to mudita directed inward is the belief that joy must be earned by monumental success. You may think only extraordinary achievements deserve recognition, a promotion, a degree, a perfect performance. Everything else feels too small, too ordinary. But this belief keeps you locked in deprivation. The truth is that life is made of small steps, and if you wait to celebrate only the monumental, you miss the steady rhythm of progress. Mudita teaches you to honor the everyday victories, getting out of bed when it was hard, speaking kindly when you felt irritated, taking a pause instead of spiraling into blame. These are not trivial. They are seeds of transformation. Another obstacle is fear of pride. Many confuse joy in one's own achievements with arrogance, believing that to celebrate is to boast. But mudita is not about superiority, it is about gratitude. When you rejoice in your progress, you are not claiming to be above others. You are honoring the effort and conditions that allowed growth. This kind of joy is humble because it recognizes that every step forward is supported by countless causes, teachers, experiences, resilience, even suffering itself. Practicing mudita inwardly also interrupts the habit of minimization. Often, when you achieve something, the harsh voice quickly whispers, "It's not enough. Anyone could have done it. It doesn't count." Over time, this erases your sense of accomplishment, leaving only emptiness. By deliberately rejoicing in what you achieve, you replace minimization with acknowledgement. You teach yourself that effort has value, that progress deserves recognition, that your life is worth celebrating. One way to cultivate this practice is through daily reflection. At the end of each day, write down one thing you did that deserves joy, no matter how small. It could be completing a task, showing patience, or simply taking care of yourself. Then pause and let yourself feel happiness for it, even if only for a moment. Over time, this builds the habit of noticing victories rather than overlooking them. Mindful breathing can also be paired with this practice. As you inhale, recall a moment of achievement, however small. As you exhale, let joy spread through the body. Feel it not just as thought, but as warmth in the chest, as ease in the muscles. This anchors mudita as an embodied experience rather than a fleeting idea. Rejoicing in your own progress also strengthens resilience. When you honor even the smallest victories, you build confidence that growth is possible. Instead of focusing only on how far you have left to go, you recognize how far you've already come. This shift prevents discouragement from taking root. It reminds you that every step matters, that transformation is happening in real time, that you are moving even when the path feels slow. On a deeper level, mudita teaches balance with suffering. Dukkha shows you how to hold pain without resistance. Mudita shows you how to hold joy without guilt. Many people are comfortable with suffering but uneasy with joy, as if happiness were undeserved or unsafe. By practicing mudita, you train the heart to accept joy as natural, to allow light in without suspicion. This balance creates wholeness. You become capable of meeting both pain and joy with equal gentleness. Scientific studies support this practice. Research shows that celebrating small wins releases dopamine, strengthening motivation and reinforcing positive habits. In contrast, ignoring progress leaves the brain starved of reward, making change harder to sustain. Mudita works not only as spiritual wisdom, but as psychological reinforcement. By rejoicing in victories, you strengthen the pathways of growth. Another profound gift of this practice is that it dissolves comparison. When you rejoice in your own progress, you no longer need to measure it against others. Your joy becomes self-sufficient, not dependent on external validation. You stop asking, "Is this as good as what they achieved?" and instead ask, "Does this bring me forward on my path?" This independence from comparison creates deep peace, because your worth is no longer tied to competition. Mudita inwardly also teaches gratitude for effort itself. Sometimes outcomes are uncertain. You may work hard and not receive the reward you hoped for, but rejoicing in effort shifts focus from results to intention. You celebrate the fact that you tried, that you showed up, that you cared. This prevents despair when outcomes fall short, because you honor the process regardless of external recognition. This practice also softens the harsh lens through which you view your past. Instead of only remembering mistakes and failures, you begin to notice moments of courage, persistence, and kindness. You see the times you stood up again after falling, the ways you kept going despite fear. By rejoicing in these past moments, you reframe your story not as a tale of inadequacy, but as a journey of resilience. On the spiritual level, mudita connects you with abundance. Self-criticism comes from a mindset of scarcity. No matter what you do, it is never enough. Mudita shifts you into abundance. There is always something to celebrate, always a reason for joy. This abundance changes the quality of life itself. Even in difficult times, you can find small victories to honor, keeping the flame of hope alive. Practical rituals help deepen this. You might create a joy jar, writing down achievements daily and placing them inside. Over weeks, the jar fills with reminders of progress. On difficult days, reading these notes renews your sense of worth. Or you might share small victories with a trusted friend, not for validation, but as an act of joy made visible. These practices train the heart to celebrate naturally. Over time, mudita becomes not just a practice, but a way of seeing. You begin to notice joy arising spontaneously when you succeed, rather than dismissing it. You smile at your own progress without needing permission. You feel gratitude for your own growth as naturally as you might for the beauty of a flower or the kindness of a stranger. The ultimate gift of mudita for yourself is liberation from the endless cycle of inadequacy. Instead of living in constant deficit, you live in recognition of abundance. You no longer chase worth through impossible standards. You honor it through present joy. You no longer deny yourself happiness until perfection arrives. You allow it to bloom with every small step. This is the heart of mudita directed inward. To turn the same joy you would offer to a friend toward yourself. To celebrate your own victories without guilt. To replace dismissal with gratitude. It is the art of saying, "I am allowed to rejoice in myself." And when you live this way, life becomes not only bearable but radiant, because you no longer wait for permission to be happy. You give it to yourself every day, in every small triumph. Rejoicing in your own victories teaches you to recognize that joy is not something reserved for others, but a gift you are also worthy of. Every step forward, no matter how small, becomes a reminder that life is not just struggle, it is also growth, resilience, and quiet triumph. Yet there is another layer to this truth, one that deepens your relationship with hardship itself. Because while joy celebrates progress, the lotus teaches you to honor the very mud that made growth possible. Without struggle, there would be no bloom. Without difficulty, there would be no unfolding of beauty. The lotus is one of Buddhism's most powerful symbols, because it rises from the darkest, murkiest water and blossoms in pure radiance. It does not grow in polished gardens but in mud, and it is precisely that mud which nourishes it. This symbol is not abstract poetry, it is an allegory for the human heart. The struggles, wounds, and disappointments you wish you could erase are often the very conditions that shape your wisdom, resilience, and capacity for compassion. To reject your hardships is to reject the soil that allowed your strengths to grow. Loving yourself fully means learning to love not only your victories, but also the struggles that gave them shape. Many people want to bloom without mud, to become radiant without acknowledging what they endured. But the lotus shows that beauty and hardship are inseparable. The petals carry the story of the mud, just as your kindness may carry the story of past pain. To embrace this is to stop treating your struggles as shameful scars and start honoring them as the ground of your becoming. This teaching is especially healing for self-criticism. Often, when people look at their past, they see only mistakes, failures, or traumas, and they condemn themselves for them. They wish they had been stronger, wiser, more disciplined. But the lotus reveals another perspective. Those very struggles are what created the depth of your heart. If you feel empathy today, it is often because you once knew loneliness. If you value patience now, it may be because you once felt the sting of frustration. Struggle shapes virtues. Instead of punishing yourself for the mud, you can thank it for the bloom. There is also a lesson in how the lotus grows. It does not bloom overnight. Slowly, inch by inch, it pushes upward through the murky water until it reaches the light. In the same way, your struggles are not transformed instantly into wisdom. The process takes time. Patience is part of the journey. Each difficult experience is not the end of the story, but part of the gradual rise. By honoring this process, you release the demand for immediate transformation and allow growth to unfold naturally. Another dimension of the lotus teaching is resilience. The flower does not resist the mud or curse the water. It uses what is there to rise. Similarly, your hardships do not need to be rejected for you to heal. They can be transformed into fuel. Pain becomes insight. Failure becomes resilience. Loneliness becomes compassion. When you see this, you stop resenting your struggles and begin to view them as teachers that strengthen the roots of your being. On a personal level, embracing the lotus within yourself means re-evaluating the stories you tell about your life. Instead of saying, "I am broken because of what I went through," you begin to say, "I am strong because I rose from it." Instead of hiding your scars, you see them as part of your bloom. This shift changes self-identity. You no longer define yourself by the mud alone, nor by the bloom alone, but by the sacred relationship between them. This teaching also applies to moments of ongoing struggle. When you are still in the mud, it may feel impossible to see beauty, but the lotus reminds you that the mud is not wasted. Even when you cannot yet see the bloom, growth is happening beneath the surface. Trusting this truth gives you courage. It tells you that hardship is not meaningless, that even now, unseen, your petals are forming. Science echoes this wisdom. Research on post-traumatic growth shows that people often develop greater resilience, deeper empathy, and stronger values after hardship. While suffering is painful, it can also lead to transformation. The lotus is a living metaphor for this truth. What seems like darkness can give rise to light. Your pain is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of your humanity, and it carries the potential to shape profound strength. This perspective also transforms how you view others. When you understand that everyone has their own mud, you stop comparing your life to polished surfaces. You recognize that behind every bloom is unseen struggle. This softens envy and fosters compassion. You stop asking, "Why did I suffer while they did not?" and start seeing that everyone's petals are nourished by their own hidden mud. Practical reflection deepens this lesson. Take time to list qualities you value in yourself today: patience, empathy, determination, and trace them back to the struggles that shaped them. You will begin to see how mud and bloom are inseparable. Each difficulty gave rise to something valuable. This exercise shifts your relationship with the past, replacing shame with gratitude. Meditation can also embody this teaching. Visualize yourself as a lotus in muddy water. With each breath, feel the roots grounded in the mud, drawing nourishment. With each inhale, sense yourself rising through the water. With each exhale, feel the petals opening toward the light. This practice creates a lived sense of transformation, reminding you that your struggles are not stains, but soil. Another way to practice is through storytelling. Instead of hiding your hardships, share them in a way that honors growth. Speak not only of pain, but of what it taught you, how it shaped you. This does not glorify suffering, but acknowledges its role in your journey. By reframing your story, you integrate struggle into identity with dignity rather than shame. Ultimately, the lotus teaches love for the whole of yourself, not just the polished parts you want the world to see, but also the muddy roots and the murky waters you'd rather forget. To love yourself is to embrace every layer: the pain, the mistakes, the resilience, the bloom. When you hold all of it with tenderness, you discover a beauty far deeper than perfection. You discover the beauty of wholeness. This is the meaning of the lotus within your own heart, that the mud was never a curse but a gift, that the water was never an enemy but a cradle, and that every struggle you faced was part of the unfolding of your bloom. When you see this, you stop hiding from your past, stop punishing yourself for your scars, and begin to live with the quiet pride of a flower that rose from the depths to meet the light. The lotus shows that your beauty is inseparable from the mud that shaped you, that your struggles are not blemishes, but the very ground of your blooming. Yet, even when we begin to honor hardship, another hidden trap often keeps us from embracing ourselves fully, the stories we tell about who we are. These stories, repeated silently over years, can be heavier than any circumstance. They whisper that you are broken, unworthy, hopeless, or destined to fail. And when clung to, they harden into cages. The Buddhist teaching of non-attachment invites you to see these self-stories for what they are: narratives, not truth. By loosening your grip on them, you open the door to compassion where once there was only judgment. Negative self-stories often form in childhood, shaped by words from parents, teachers, or peers. A single moment of criticism may echo into decades of belief. I am stupid, I am lazy, I am not enough. Over time, these words become internalized until they feel like identity itself. But when examined closely, you see that they are not fixed. They are memories woven into narrative, replayed so often they appear solid. Non-attachment means you stop treating these stories as absolute definitions and start recognizing them as conditioned thoughts. The danger of clinging to harsh self-stories is that they distort perception. If you believe I am unworthy, you filter every experience through that lens. A kind word becomes suspicion. A success becomes minimized. A failure becomes confirmation. The story sustains itself not because it is true, but because it shapes the way you interpret reality. Non-attachment interrupts this cycle. By stepping back, you see that the story is not the same as the present moment. It is a perspective, not a law. Another cost of these narratives is the way they prevent compassion. When you hold tightly to the story of being broken, you withhold kindness from yourself because you believe it is undeserved. Compassion feels like a lie when the story insists on unworthiness. Non-attachment breaks this bind. By loosening identification with the narrative, you create space to offer care, even while imperfection remains. You realize that flaws do not erase worth, and compassion is not earned by perfection, but given freely because suffering itself deserves relief. The practice of non-attachment does not mean denying the past. It does not mean pretending that painful events never happened. Rather, it means you stop letting those events crystallize into absolute identity. For example, failing at something does not mean I am a failure. Being left does not mean I am unlovable. Non-attachment allows you to acknowledge the pain of those events without fusing them into your essence. The event happened. The story that you are permanently defined by it does not have to. Mindfulness is a key tool here. When a negative self-story arises, I'll never change, you can observe it like a passing cloud. Label it as a thought, not as truth. This simple recognition creates distance. Instead of drowning in the narrative, you witness it. With practice, you learn that the story always comes and goes, but the awareness that notices it remains untouched. That awareness is who you truly are, not the harsh words, but the spaciousness that holds them. Another helpful practice is inquiry. When a story repeats, gently ask, is this always true? Who told me this? Do I know it now, in this very breath? Often, the story dissolves under scrutiny. For instance, the belief I am lazy may crumble when you remember the countless times you showed persistence. The story's power lies not in accuracy, but in repetition. By questioning it, you loosen its grip. Non-attachment also involves replacing judgment with curiosity. Instead of saying, this proves I am worthless, ask, what is this experience teaching me? This shift reframes difficulties as information rather than condemnation. It allows growth without self-destruction. Compassion thrives in this openness because the focus is no longer on proving identity, but on learning gently from life. Science supports this wisdom. Cognitive psychology shows that self-schemas, stories about the self, shape how we interpret the world. Negative schemas trap people in cycles of depression and low self-worth. But research also shows that these schemas can be restructured through mindfulness and self-compassion. This is the modern language for non-attachment, releasing rigid narratives so new perspectives can emerge. Another powerful step is storytelling with choice. Instead of letting old stories dominate, you can consciously tell new ones. Not false affirmations, but balanced truths. Instead of I am always a failure, you can say, I fail sometimes, but I also succeed. Instead of I am broken, you can say, I am healing. Each new story weakens the hold of the old, until compassion flows naturally where judgment once stood. Non-attachment also teaches patience. These stories may have lived in your mind for decades. Letting go is not instant. Sometimes the same harsh narrative will return again and again. But each time you meet it with awareness instead of belief, its roots weaken. Over time, what once felt like unshakable identity becomes background noise, no longer controlling your life. The practice of loosening self-stories also transforms relationships. When you stop clinging to, I am unworthy, you stop entering connections from a place of desperation or fear. When you stop believing, I am unlovable, you become open to receiving love without suspicion. In this way, non-attachment not only heals the inner world, but also changes how you relate outwardly. Meditation practices can embody this release. Sit quietly and let thoughts of self-definition arise. Notice them without judgment, repeating inwardly, not me, not mine. This phrase, drawn from Buddhist teachings, helps create space between awareness and narrative. Over time, you begin to feel the freedom of being more than any label, more than any story. Ultimately, non-attachment to harsh self-stories is not about erasing identity, but about softening it. You still have experiences, qualities, and preferences, but you no longer mistake them for absolute truth. You see yourself as fluid, changing, alive. This fluidity allows compassion to flow naturally because there is no rigid identity to defend or condemn. There is only awareness, present with each moment, offering care where it is needed. This is the invitation of non-attachment, to release the weight of negative narratives, to meet yourself freshly in each breath, to discover that your worth has never depended on old stories. When you live this way, compassion is no longer blocked. It rises freely, like light streaming through a window once covered in dust, illuminating the truth that you were always worthy of love. Letting go of harsh self-stories reveals that you are not chained to old narratives, not bound forever to the labels that once defined you. Yet, with that freedom comes a new responsibility, the way you choose to live now. Each thought, each action, each word becomes part of the pattern that shapes tomorrow. This is where the teaching of karma steps forward, not as a threat, not as a shadow of punishment, but as a gentle invitation to care for yourself through mindful choices. Karma has often been misunderstood as cosmic retribution, as if the universe were keeping a ledger of faults and waiting to deliver pain for every misstep. But in truth, karma is much simpler and far more compassionate. It is the natural law of cause and effect, the unfolding of conditions that arise from what we cultivate. Just as planting seeds leads to certain flowers or fruits, so too do our actions and thoughts plant the seeds of future experience. To view karma in this light is to see it not as a whip, but as guidance, reminding us that every moment offers the chance to plant seeds of kindness, patience, and care for ourselves. This perspective softens the inner critic. Instead of using karma as another reason to punish yourself, "I must deserve this suffering because of what I did," you begin to see it as a compass. The suffering you feel is not evidence of punishment, it is a signal of imbalance, an invitation to realign with compassion. If harshness leads to more pain, then gentleness is the wiser path. Karma is not saying, "You are condemned." It is saying, "Choose differently, and your path will shift." This truth gives you back agency. When you believe suffering is punishment, you feel powerless. But when you see karma as gentle accountability, you realize that change is possible. Your choices matter not in some distant lifetime only, but here and now. The way you speak to yourself today shapes the tone of your inner world tomorrow. The way you treat your body today shapes its strength and peace tomorrow. This recognition transforms small daily actions into sacred steps of self-care. It also reframes mistakes. Instead of branding them as permanent failures, karma shows them as lessons. If a harsh action creates pain, it is not proof of brokenness, but an invitation to learn. Every misstep is feedback, not a final judgment. This perspective allows you to take responsibility without drowning in guilt. You acknowledge the impact of your actions, then choose differently with compassion. Accountability becomes growth, not punishment. Mindfulness plays a central role here. To practice mindful awareness is to pause before planting seeds. Instead of reacting from habit, anger, self-criticism, avoidance, you notice the choice in front of you. If I follow this thought, will it deepen suffering or ease it? If I speak this word to myself, will it plant kindness or cruelty? In this way, karma becomes an active practice of caring for yourself with every decision. This teaching also extends to self-talk. Each phrase you direct inward is a seed. Harsh words plant bitterness that lingers, while gentle words plant ease that expands. The difference may feel small in the moment, but karma reminds you that repetition shapes the garden of your mind. Choosing compassion consistently creates a field where harshness has less room to grow. The body, too, reflects this law. When you listen to its needs with care, resting when tired, nourishing with good food, moving with respect, you plant seeds of health and vitality. When you ignore or punish it, you plant seeds of exhaustion and disconnection. Karma here is not abstract philosophy but direct experience. How you treat yourself today creates the conditions you will live in tomorrow. Scientific studies affirm this wisdom. Habits formed through repeated choices shape neural pathways in the brain. Acts of self-criticism reinforce stress responses, while acts of compassion rewire the brain toward resilience and calm. Karma, in modern terms, is neuroplasticity. The brain changes according to the seeds you plant. This truth empowers you to cultivate inner kindness as a daily discipline, knowing each small choice contributes to long-term transformation. Another gift of this perspective is patience. Karma shows that results take time. Just as seeds need seasons to bloom, the fruits of compassionate choices may not appear instantly. This prevents discouragement. Instead of giving up when change feels slow, you trust the process. Each kind word, each mindful breath, each gentle act is part of the unseen work of growth. The bloom will come in its time, and knowing this allows you to continue without urgency or despair. Karma also encourages humility. If you are suffering, it does not mean you are cursed or beyond repair. It means certain seeds were planted, perhaps by past actions, perhaps by conditions beyond your control, and they are now bearing fruit. By meeting this with humility, you stop blaming yourself as if suffering proves failure. Instead, you accept responsibility for what you can choose now, without drowning in shame for what is already done. This practice deepens self-respect. When you live with the awareness that each choice shapes your path, you begin to honor even the smallest decisions. You no longer dismiss acts of care as unimportant. Drinking water, resting, pausing for breath, these become acts of accountability to your own well-being. Each one is a quiet promise to yourself, "I will not abandon me." Over time, this builds a foundation of trust within, because you prove through action that you are committed to your own care. Another dimension of karma as gentle accountability is its role in relationships. How you treat yourself affects how you treat others. If you plant seeds of cruelty inward, they often spill outward as impatience or defensiveness. If you cultivate kindness inward, it naturally radiates outward as gentleness. Karma reminds you that caring for yourself is not selfish. It is the ground from which compassion for others grows. Meditation offers a way to embody this. Sit quietly and reflect on the seeds you plant daily. Ask, what choices bring me closer to peace? What choices deepen suffering? Then resolve gently to water the seeds of kindness more often. This is not about perfection, but about consistency. Even when you slip, you return again, choosing compassion over punishment. Each return is itself an act of karma, an act that shapes the path toward greater freedom. Perhaps the most healing aspect of this teaching is its hopefulness. No matter how much suffering has come before, karma teaches that the next choice still matters. You are never trapped, never beyond renewal. The past may shape conditions, but the present always holds possibility. Each moment offers the chance to plant seeds of love. This truth replaces despair with quiet determination. Ultimately, viewing karma as gentle accountability changes the way you live. You stop fearing punishment and start honoring choice. You stop punishing yourself for missteps and start learning from them. You begin to see your life as a garden, one you tend with awareness, patience, and care. And as the seasons pass, you notice more flowers of peace, more fruits of compassion, until the garden itself becomes proof that kindness is the most powerful seed you can plant. Seeing karma as gentle accountability teaches you that every choice you make is an act of self-care or self-neglect, that the seeds you plant in each moment shape the way you experience tomorrow. But this understanding is not meant to create pressure, it is meant to inspire gentleness. And sometimes the most profound gentleness you can offer yourself is to slow down, to release the constant push for improvement, and to allow each step to be enough. This is where walking meditation becomes a living practice of compassion, a way to embody kindness, not in thought alone, but in motion. Walking meditation is often misunderstood as simply moving slowly or taking mindful steps. But in truth, it is an invitation to inhabit your body with respect, to walk not as a task, but as a form of care. In a world that prizes speed and productivity, moving without rushing is an act of quiet rebellion. It tells your mind, I do not need to hurry to be worthy. I am allowed to be here, step by step. This practice transforms walking from a mechanical habit into a sanctuary where self-love is lived through the body. The heart of walking meditation is presence. Each step becomes a moment of awareness, not a means to an end. You are not walking to arrive, you are walking to experience. The sensation of your foot touching the ground, the shifting of weight, the rhythm of breath, all of these become anchors to remind you that this body, in this moment, is deserving of kindness. Instead of rushing forward into the future, you rest in the truth that this step, right now, is enough. This practice softens the harshness of self-improvement. Often, we treat life as a race, each step measured against the demand to be better, faster, more successful. Even self-love can become another goal to chase, another standard to fail. Walking meditation interrupts this cycle. It says, you do not need to be better while taking this step, you only need to be. By releasing the demand for progress, you allow yourself to rest in the simplicity of being alive. There is also a healing effect on the body. Many people carry stress in constant tension, shoulders hunched, breath shallow, movements rushed. Walking meditation invites release. As you walk slowly, with awareness, muscles soften, breath deepens, posture aligns. The body begins to feel safe again. This safety is not forced, but arises naturally from the rhythm of mindful steps. When your body feels cared for, your mind follows, learning to treat itself with the same patience. On an emotional level, walking meditation teaches patience with your own journey. Each step is small, almost imperceptible in progress. Yet, step by step, distance is covered. This mirrors the process of healing. Growth is not dramatic leaps, but quiet consistency. By practicing walking meditation, you embody the truth that progress does not need urgency. It unfolds naturally as long as you keep stepping with awareness. This practice also strengthens connection between mind and body. In daily life, many people live detached from their physical presence, lost in thought, moving unconsciously. Walking meditation restores unity. You feel the ground beneath your feet, the sway of your arms, the beat of your heart. You return to the reality that you are not only a mind that criticizes, but also a body that breathes and moves. This reconnection nurtures self-respect, because you experience yourself not as an idea, but as a living being. Another dimension of walking meditation is freedom from urgency. The world constantly tells you to hurry, hurry to achieve, hurry to heal, hurry to prove your worth. By choosing to walk slowly, deliberately, you break this conditioning. Each slow step is a statement that you do not need to rush to earn love. This practice is not laziness but liberation, the recognition that life is not measured only by speed, but by depth of presence. Walking meditation also becomes a way to integrate mindfulness into daily life. Sitting meditation can feel separate, confined to a cushion or specific time. But walking is universal. It can be practiced anywhere on a street, in a hallway, in a park. This makes self-compassion portable. Wherever you walk, you can choose to slow down, to breathe with your steps, to remind yourself of gentleness. In this way, compassion becomes not just an idea, but a daily rhythm. Scientific studies support the benefits of mindful walking. Research shows it lowers stress, improves mood, and increases overall well-being. But beyond measurable outcomes, the true gift lies in the lived experience. The moment when you realize you are walking not to escape yourself, but to be with yourself, step by step, without judgment. Walking meditation can also be paired with intention. Before beginning, you might silently dedicate your steps. May each step remind me of my worth. May each step bring me closer to peace. These intentions infuse the practice with purpose, turning every movement into a quiet act of self-care. Even when the mind wanders, the rhythm of intention pulls it gently back, reinforcing the message of compassion. This practice is also a way to transform self-talk. When harsh thoughts arise, "I am not enough, I must do more," you can align them with your steps, releasing them with each exhale. Each step becomes a letting go of the burden of criticism, a reminder that you are moving forward without needing to carry unnecessary weight. Over time, the body learns this rhythm of release, and harsh thoughts lose their power. Walking meditation is especially healing when practiced outdoors. The natural world mirrors its teachings. Trees grow slowly, rivers flow at their own pace, the earth moves without rush. By walking in nature with awareness, you align yourself with this rhythm, reminding your mind that you, too, are allowed to grow slowly, to move gently, to belong without striving. Ultimately, walking meditation becomes more than a practice. It becomes a way of relating to yourself. Each step is a message. I care for you. I will not rush you. I will walk with you. This message counters years of self-neglect, teaching the heart that it deserves patience. Step by step, compassion is no longer abstract. It is felt in the soles of your feet, in the rhythm of your breath, in the quiet presence of being. This is self-compassion in motion, not spoken only in words or thought, but lived through every step you take. When you allow yourself to move slowly, to walk with care, you prove to yourself that love is not something distant. It is present in the rhythm of your life, carried forward with each gentle step. Each step taken in walking meditation affirms that you are allowed to move gently, without rushing toward an imagined finish line. The body learns patience, and the heart remembers presence. Yet, even as the body slows, another current often flows beneath the surface, the voice inside your mind. For many, this voice is not gentle. It criticizes, compares, and repeats words you would never say to someone you love. If walking meditation teaches compassion in motion, then the next step is learning compassion in language. This is where the Buddhist principle of right speech, turned inward, becomes essential. Right speech traditionally refers to how we communicate with others, speaking truthfully, kindly, and with purpose. But the most constant dialogue you will ever have is the one with yourself. Every day, From the moment you wake until sleep, you are speaking inwardly, commenting on your choices, interpreting your experiences, narrating your worth. If these inner words are harsh, they carve deep grooves of suffering. If they are kind, they create space for peace. To practice right speech inwardly is to recognize the power of this inner dialogue and to choose words that heal rather than harm. The first step is awareness. Most people are not conscious of how cruel their self-talk can be. A simple mistake may trigger automatic thoughts like, "I'm so stupid," or "I can never get anything right." These words may feel casual, but repeated daily they become powerful reinforcements of negative identity. Awareness means catching these phrases, hearing them clearly, instead of letting them slip by unnoticed. When you become aware, you can begin to choose differently. The second step is discernment. Right speech outwardly is guided by questions. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? These same questions can be turned inward. When the thought arises, "I am worthless," you can ask, "Is this true? Is this kind? Is this useful?" The answer is clear. It fails on all three counts. By holding self-talk to the same standard you would apply to others, you dismantle the habit of cruelty. This practice is not about forcing positive affirmations that feel hollow. It is about aligning your inner words with honesty and compassion. Instead of saying, "I am terrible at everything," you might say, "This didn't go well, but I can learn from it." Instead of, "I am lazy," you might say, "I need rest, and I will return with energy." These adjustments are subtle but powerful. They acknowledge reality without embedding judgment. Right speech inwardly also means avoiding exaggeration. The inner critic often speaks in absolutes: always, never, everyone, nothing. These words intensify suffering, making challenges feel permanent and overwhelming. By noticing exaggeration and replacing it with balance, you soften the blow. "I always fail" becomes "I struggled this time." "I never do anything right" becomes "I made a mistake, but I have also succeeded before." This shift restores perspective and prevents despair. Another aspect of this practice is tone. Even when words are technically neutral, the tone of inner speech can be harsh. Saying, "You need to try harder," can feel like encouragement or condemnation, depending on the tone. Right speech inwardly involves adopting a tone of kindness, the way you might speak to a child or a dear friend. This tone communicates safety, turning even corrective thoughts into supportive guidance rather than attacks. The practice also extends to silence. Sometimes, right speech means not speaking at all, even inwardly. When the mind races with criticism, choosing silence can be healing. Taking a breath, returning to presence, and letting go of commentary allows the nervous system to rest. Silence itself can be an act of compassion, breaking the cycle of constant inner judgment. Scientific research supports this practice. Studies on self-talk show that harsh inner language increases stress, lowers motivation, and reinforces negative self-image. In contrast, compassionate self-talk improves resilience, enhances learning, and reduces anxiety. The brain responds to inner words as if they were spoken aloud. This means the way you speak inwardly is not trivial. It shapes your mental and emotional reality. To cultivate this skill, you can practice journaling with awareness of tone. Write down common self-criticisms, then rewrite them as if you were speaking to someone you love. Over time, this exercise trains the mind to adopt kinder language naturally. Another practice is pausing during moments of stress and repeating a chosen phrase of compassion. "May I be patient? May I be gentle. May I keep trying. These phrases become anchors, interrupting harsh patterns and replacing them with care. The impact of right speech inwardly extends beyond personal peace. When you learn to speak to yourself with kindness, your outer words also change. You become less likely to lash out at others because the harshness inside has softened. Relationships deepen because the compassion you cultivate inwardly radiates outward. In this way, right speech inwardly is not only self-care, but also a gift to those around you. Ultimately, practicing right speech with yourself means no longer being your own bully. It means refusing to allow your inner world to be poisoned by words you would never accept from anyone else. It means creating a dialogue of honesty, kindness, and encouragement that supports healing instead of hindering it. Each word you speak inwardly becomes part of the garden of your heart. When those words are kind, the garden flourishes. This is the heart of right speech turned inward. To recognize that your inner voice is powerful, to treat it as carefully as you would treat your words to others, and to use it as a constant practice of compassion. By choosing honesty without cruelty, correction without judgment, and encouragement without exaggeration, you create an inner world where self-love is not an abstract concept, but a lived reality, spoken in every thought and every phrase that arises within. Speaking inwardly with kindness turns your mind from a battlefield into a softer space where healing can take root. But even when your language grows gentler, you may still feel the noise of many voices inside you. The critic, the dreamer, the fearful one, the hopeful one, they all speak, sometimes in harmony, often in conflict. Instead of silencing or rejecting them, the path forward is learning to see these voices as members of an inner community, each with something to say, each deserving respect. This is the practice of building a sangha within. In Buddhist tradition, sangha refers to the community of practitioners who support one another on the path. It is the group that reminds you of wisdom when you forget, that lifts you when you stumble, that reflects your value when you doubt. To cultivate a sangha within is to extend this principle inward. The many parts of yourself, the anxious child, the disciplined adult, the weary soul, the joyful spirit, can be seen not as enemies, but as companions walking alongside you. Instead of battling them, you learn to befriend them. The first step is recognition. Often, inner voices are lumped together into a vague sense of unease. You feel bad or not enough without identifying who is speaking inside. Recognition means slowing down and listening carefully. You may hear the critic insisting you must do better, the fearful voice warning you of danger, the tender voice longing for rest. By naming these voices, you give them form, and once they are seen, they can be addressed with compassion rather than ignored or suppressed. The second step is respect. Even harsh voices often arise from a protective instinct. The inner critic may sound cruel, but often it is trying to shield you from failure by pushing you to improve. The fearful voice may hold you back, but it is also trying to keep you safe. Respect means acknowledging the intention beneath the tone. You do not need to obey every voice, but you can thank it for its concern. This softens the inner climate, replacing hostility with understanding. Befriending these voices also means balancing them. No single voice should dominate the sangha within. When the critic is too loud, the nurturing voice must also be heard. When fear takes over, the voice of courage must be invited forward. This balancing act is not about silencing, but about ensuring all members of your inner community are included. Like any healthy sangha, the goal is harmony, not uniformity. This practice also involves leadership. You are not at the mercy of your voices. You are the one who holds them together. Think of yourself as the facilitator of this inner community. You listen to each member, acknowledge their concerns, and then guide the group toward wise action. This role requires patience and compassion, not force. Leadership in this sense means treating yourself as both listener and guide, creating unity out of diversity. Scientific psychology echoes this truth. Internal family systems therapy, for example, views the mind as composed of many parts, each with its own role. Healing comes not from erasing parts, but from integrating them with compassion. Buddhism and modern psychology converge here. Peace is found not by denying inner voices, but by befriending them. To cultivate this inner sangha, meditation can be a powerful tool. Sit quietly and invite one voice to speak. Listen without judgment, then invite another and another. With each, offer compassion. Over time, this practice builds familiarity and respect. Instead of being overwhelmed by inner conflict, you learn to host it with calmness, creating space where all voices are heard, but none dominate. Another practical method is journaling dialogues. Write down a concern from the perspective of one inner voice, then respond from another. For example, the critic may say, "You are failing." The nurturing voice may reply, "You are trying, and that matters." By allowing these exchanges to unfold on paper, you make the Sangha within visible, creating clarity and balance. This practice changes how you respond to struggle. Instead of collapsing into one voice, often the harshest, you recognize the chorus. You realize that even in moments of self-doubt, there are other parts of you offering patience, hope, and strength. Listening to the full Sangha helps you act from wisdom rather than fear. Over time, the Sangha within becomes a source of stability. When external support is absent, you know you can turn inward to a community that includes all of you. No part is exiled, no voice is silenced. You carry your own companionship, complete and whole. This inner unity strengthens outer relationships too, because when you learn to meet your own voices with compassion, you extend the same respect to others. Ultimately, befriending your inner voices is about ending the civil war inside. It is about recognizing that every part of you, even the ones that sound harsh or fearful, belongs. When you create an inner Sangha, you no longer live divided against yourself. You live as a community in harmony, guided by compassion, supported from within. This is the practice of wholeness, the realization that you are not fragments to be fought over, but a gathering of voices deserving to be heard, respected, and loved. When the Sangha within is welcomed with compassion, the voices inside you no longer feel like enemies but companions with something to teach. Yet, even as harmony grows, one habit often lingers stubbornly, the tendency to carry old conclusions about who you are. Stories of failure, of weakness, of not being enough, repeat themselves so often that they begin to feel like unshakable truth. These assumptions weigh heavily, leaving little room for freedom. Zen offers an antidote to this burden through the practice of beginner's mind, a way of meeting yourself without the weight of yesterday's judgments. Beginner's mind is the attitude of openness and curiosity you bring to something when you encounter it for the very first time. Think of a child exploring the world, eyes wide, unclouded by past definitions. In Zen, this state of mind is considered the heart of practice, because it removes the barriers of assumption and expectation. Applied inwardly, beginner's mind allows you to meet yourself not as the person defined by all your past mistakes, but as someone new in this moment, someone unbound, someone with possibilities still untouched. Self-blame thrives on the opposite attitude. It says, "I know who I am the one who always fails, I am the one who cannot change, I am the one who ruins everything." These statements feel certain, but they are prisons built from repetition. Beginner's mind loosens their grip by asking, what if I do not know who I am in this moment? What if I meet myself freshly without dragging all the past into today? This shift is not denial, but freedom. It acknowledges that the self is not a fixed object, but a living process, and that every moment is a chance to begin again. The first step in practicing beginner's mind toward yourself is noticing the weight of certainty. When the thought arises, I always do this wrong, pause and see the certainty in it. Then ask, is it true now, in this moment, or is it only a memory of before? This question opens space. Even if you failed yesterday, beginner's mind asks what is possible today. It reminds you that the present is not obligated to repeat the past. Another step is curiosity. Instead of condemning yourself for a mistake, you approach it as a student. You ask, what happened here? What can I learn? Curiosity removes the sting of blame. It transforms mistakes from verdicts into lessons. This attitude mirrors the way a scientist observes or a child explores without harsh judgment, only with interest. By practicing curiosity toward yourself, you replace the burden of blame with the energy of discovery. Beginner's mind also changes how you approach growth. Instead of demanding that you know everything or succeed instantly, you allow yourself to be a learner. A beginner is expected to stumble, to try again, to progress gradually. When you apply this mindset inwardly, you release the unrealistic expectation of perfection. You treat yourself as someone learning the art of being alive, not as someone who must already have mastered it. This shift dissolves shame and invites patience. On a deeper level, beginner's mind means loosening identification with old labels. The words failure, weak, broken are not truths, but conclusions formed by past experiences. Beginner's mind asks you to drop them, even for a moment, and see who you are without them. Perhaps you are more resilient than you realized. Perhaps you carry strengths overlooked while focusing on flaws. This openness reveals dimensions of yourself that blame had hidden. Scientific studies echo this wisdom. Research in psychology shows that adopting a growth mindset, seeing yourself as capable of learning rather than fixed in traits, leads to greater resilience and success. Beginner's mind is the spiritual parallel to this, reminding you that identity is fluid, not fixed, and that each moment is an opportunity to start anew. Meditation can embody this practice. Sit quietly and breathe, allowing thoughts of identity to arise. I am this, I am that. With each thought, gently say, maybe, maybe not. Then return to the breath, meeting it as if for the first time. This practice trains the mind to release certainty and cultivate openness. Over time, the grip of self-blame weakens because it cannot survive without certainty. Another exercise is to approach daily tasks with fresh eyes. When brushing your teeth, eating, or walking, notice the details as if you had never done them before. The texture, the rhythm, the sensations. This habit of freshness extends inward. If even brushing your teeth can be new, perhaps you too can be new in each moment. This realization softens old narratives and makes room for compassion. Beginner's mind also transforms how you view your future. Self-blame often projects past failures forward, insisting you will repeat them endlessly. Beginner's mind interrupts this pattern by saying, I do not know what is possible yet. This openness restores hope. Instead of assuming the worst, you remain curious about what might unfold. Hope grows not from certainty, but from openness to possibility. In relationships, this practice brings renewal. When you drop assumptions about yourself, you also drop assumptions about how others see you. Instead of assuming judgment, you remain open to kindness. Instead of assuming rejection, you remain open to connection. This openness fosters authenticity because you no longer act from fear of old stories but from presence in the moment. Ultimately, beginner's mind teaches that you are never fully defined by your past. Each day, each breath, offers a new beginning. Self-blame loses its power because its certainty crumbles. You no longer carry the heavy identity of the one who failed, but step into the lightness of being a learner, open to discovery, free to grow. This practice does not erase your history, but reframes it as part of an unfolding process, one that is not finished and never fully fixed. This is the gift of Zen beginner's mind, the ability to meet yourself as new, to release the heavy burden of old conclusions, and to allow compassion to replace blame. When you live this way, every moment becomes a doorway to freedom. You no longer ask, "Who am I?" with despair. You ask it with curiosity, and in that openness, you discover that who you are is not limited by yesterday, but alive in the possibilities of today. Meeting yourself with beginner's mind breaks the weight of certainty, allowing you to see each day as a chance to begin again. But even when blame softens, another layer of suffering often remains: the urge to measure your life against others. You see their successes, their appearances, their paths, and something inside whispers, "I am less." This comparison is one of the deepest roots of self-criticism. The Buddha's teaching of non-self offers a way out, not by inflating the ego to compete, but by loosening the grip on identity itself. Non-self, or anatta, does not mean you do not exist. It means that what you call self is not fixed, not permanent, not an isolated essence. It is a collection of changing conditions, body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts arising and passing in each moment. When you forget this truth, you cling to a rigid idea of who you are, and comparison becomes sharp. You believe your identity must match or surpass the identity of another. But when you see that neither identity is solid, the game of comparison loses its foundation. There is nothing fixed to defend, nothing permanent to compete with, only the flow of experience. Comparison thrives on the illusion of a permanent self. You say, "I am not as successful as them," as if your current circumstances define your essence. You say, "They are better looking, smarter, more loved," as if their current state is fixed forever. But both your life and theirs are impermanent streams. Today's triumph can fade, today's struggle can transform, and nothing about either defines an eternal truth. Non-self reveals that comparing fixed selves is like comparing shadows. They shift with the light and hold no solid substance. The first step in practicing this teaching is noticing how tightly you cling to identity. Pay attention to the phrases, "I am this kind of person," "I could never," "I always." These words feel certain, but they freeze you into definitions. When you then look at others, you compare their frozen image with your frozen image, and suffering arises. By loosening these definitions, you open space. Instead of, "I am a failure," you say, "I experienced failure." Instead of, "I am not talented," you say, "This skill is still growing." Small shifts in language reflect the deeper truth of non-self. You are not a fixed essence, but a living process. Another step is to reflect on the causes and conditions that shape every person. The success you envy in another did not arise from an eternal quality. They were shaped by family, education, timing, opportunities, and countless unseen factors. Your own struggles also come from conditions, many beyond your control. Recognizing this truth dissolves the myth of inherent superiority or inferiority. Life is not a contest between permanent selves, but a dance of conditions, always changing. Non-self also reframes self-worth. When you cling to identity, you tie worth to comparison. Worth is higher if you are better than others, and lower if you are worse. But when you release identity, worth is no longer conditional. You are not valuable because you outperform. You are valuable because you are a living, breathing part of this unfolding world. Nothing can add to or subtract from that basic truth. This teaching also transforms relationships. Comparison often poisons connection, making another person's joy feel like your loss. But when you see non-self, you realize their success is not a threat to you, because there is no fixed self to protect. Their joy becomes part of the shared human story, and you can celebrate it without resentment. This shift brings peace, because you no longer carry the constant weight of measuring your place against others. Meditation can deepen this understanding. As you sit, observe thoughts of comparison arise. Notice how quickly they attach to identity, I am less than them. Then, gently release by reminding yourself, this thought is not me. This identity is not fixed. Return to the breath, the body, the present, where no comparison exists. With practice, these thoughts lose their hold, because you see their emptiness directly. Science offers support here too. Studies show that constant social comparison fuels anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. But practices of mindfulness, which align with non-self, reduce comparison by anchoring attention in direct experience rather than in imagined identity. When you focus on being rather than on defending a self, comparison fades. Another dimension of this teaching is compassion. When you see that others are also not fixed selves but beings shaped by conditions, you soften. The one you envy may also suffer deeply. The one you compare yourself against may carry hidden pain. This awareness shifts comparison into empathy. You stop asking, am I better or worse? And begin asking, how can I meet both myself and them with kindness? Non-self also brings humility. You realize that achievements are not the result of an eternal superior self, but of conditions that aligned. This humility protects against arrogance and fosters gratitude. At the same time, you see that struggles are not proof of an inferior self, but conditions that can change. This perspective prevents despair and fosters patience. To integrate this teaching daily, practice releasing labels. When you catch yourself saying, I am always behind, pause and ask, is this a permanent truth or a temporary condition? When you see it is temporary, the sting of comparison lessens. You begin to experience yourself as fluid, not trapped in a fixed role. Ultimately, non-self frees you from the exhausting game of comparison. Without a fixed identity to defend, you are no longer bound to measure your life against others. You can appreciate their path without resentment and walk your own path without shame. You live as a process, not a statue, and in that process there is endless room for compassion and growth. This is the gift of non-self. To release the burden of identity, to dissolve the root of comparison, and to rest in the truth that you are not a fixed being to be measured, but a flowing experience to be embraced. In that freedom, joy arises naturally, because there is nothing left to prove. Letting go of the fixed self frees you from the endless comparisons that fuel so much quiet suffering. You no longer see yourself as less or more than others, but as part of the same flow of conditions, changing moment by moment. Yet, even with this freedom, there are still forces inside that rise like shadows, fears, cravings, anger, shame, that feel larger than reason and harder than philosophy. They appear not as abstract ideas, but as inner demons, voices that frighten, paralyze, or exhaust you. Tibetan Buddhism offers a radical way to meet them through the practice of Cho. not by fighting or suppressing them, but by turning toward them with compassion and generosity. Che, which means cutting through, is a practice that invites you to confront what terrifies you and to meet it with offering instead of resistance. Traditionally, practitioners would visualize their body as an offering to the very demons they feared, transforming terror into compassion. While its roots are profound and ritualistic, the essence of Che can be adapted inwardly, the willingness to face your inner demons and befriend them instead of waging war against them. This shift transforms fear into teacher and self-rejection into self-acceptance. The first step in adapting Che inwardly is recognition. Often, inner demons hide in disguise. Anxiety may appear as constant restlessness, anger as defensiveness, shame as silence. Without awareness, you treat these demons as truth rather than as energies. Recognition means pausing when discomfort rises and asking, what part of me is speaking right now? What fear, what pain is taking form? Naming the demon does not empower it. It reveals its nature. The second step is turning toward rather than away. The natural instinct when fear or shame arises is to suppress it, to distract, to bury it. But suppression only makes demons stronger. They grow in the shadows, demanding more energy to keep them hidden. Che teaches the opposite. Turn directly toward them. When shame rises, look at it. When fear grows, sit with it. This turning is not easy, but it is the beginning of freedom, because demons lose power when faced with compassion. Befriending your demons means offering instead of resisting. In traditional practice, practitioners offer their very being to the demons as nourishment, saying, "Take this, take all I have." In psychological terms, this means you stop fighting inner pain and instead welcome it with kindness. For example, when fear whispers, "You will fail," instead of silencing it, you can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me. You may sit with me." This offering transforms the relationship. The demon becomes less an enemy and more a frightened guest, one that can be soothed rather than battled. This practice also reveals the hidden purpose behind demons. Fear often arises to keep you safe, shame to prevent rejection, anger to defend boundaries. While their methods may be harsh, their intention is often protection. When you meet them with compassion, you begin to see their function. You can say, "I see you are trying to protect me, but I no longer need your methods. I choose a gentler way." This recognition honors the part of you that suffered enough to create these defenses, while freeing you from being ruled by them. Che also teaches surrender of ego. Much of the fear around demons comes from clinging to a fixed sense of self that must be defended at all costs. When you release this clinging, demons lose their target. If there is no rigid self to protect, fear loses its urgency. Offering yourself to your demons symbolically represents this surrender. You no longer fight to preserve an image of perfection, but allow yourself to be human, flaws and all. Modern psychology reflects these truths. Exposure therapy shows that facing fears reduces their hold, while self-compassion practices soften the impact of shame and anger. Neuroscience demonstrates that avoidance strengthens fear circuits, while mindful acceptance rewires them toward calm. Che embodies these principles on a spiritual level, reminding us that what we resist persists, but what we embrace with compassion transforms. Practical exercises can bring this teaching into daily life. When a strong emotion arises, instead of reacting or repressing, close your eyes and visualize it as a figure, a demon of fear, shame, or anger. Picture its form without judgment. Then, instead of pushing it away, offer it kindness. Say inwardly, "I see you. I know you arose to protect me. May you be at peace." This visualization creates space between you and the emotion, transforming it from threat to teacher. Another practice is journaling dialogues with your demons. Write from the perspective of fear, "I am here to keep you from being hurt." Then respond from compassion, "I thank you for trying to help, but I choose courage." This conversation turns the battle into a relationship, one where compassion has the final word. Over time, befriending your demons changes the way you experience inner life. Instead of being ambushed by fear or overwhelmed by shame, you greet them with recognition. They may still appear, but their arrival no longer means collapse. They become part of your sangha within, voices with history, but not enemies. And in their softening, you find freedom. The deepest lesson of Cho is that the very things you fear most often hold the greatest potential for growth. Demons point to wounds that still need care. By facing them, you not only disarm their power but also uncover the places in yourself that most need love. The mud that once seemed unbearable becomes nourishment for the lotus of your heart. This is the essence of Cho, adapted inwardly. To stop running from your demons, to stop silencing them, and instead to meet them with generosity. In that offering, the war within ends. Fear loses its sharpness, shame loses its grip, and anger loses its fire. You no longer live as a battlefield but as a sanctuary, where even your darkest parts are welcomed with compassion. This is not weakness but courage, the courage to see every part of yourself as worthy of care, even the demons. When you stop fighting your demons and begin to offer them compassion, the inner battlefield turns into a place of dialogue and care. Fear softens, shame loosens, and anger loses its sharp edge. But the path of gentleness does not rely only on moments of deep practice. It is also woven into the smallest signals of daily life. The world around you constantly speaks in subtle ways, sounds, pauses, and rhythms that can either pass unnoticed or become gateways to awareness. The bell of mindfulness teaches you to hear these ordinary sounds as reminders to return to yourself, to pause, and to practice self-care in the middle of whatever you are doing. The bell of mindfulness does not need to be a temple bell. It can be the ding of a phone notification, the chime of a clock, the sound of a kettle boiling, or even the closing of a door. Each sound can be treated as a call, a gentle hand placed on your shoulder, saying, "Come back to yourself. This is the moment to breathe. This is the moment to care." By adopting this perspective, you transform the noise of daily life into invitations for compassion. The practice begins with intention. Instead of reacting automatically to sounds, you set the intention to treat them as cues for presence. For example, when your phone buzzes, instead of rushing to check it with tension, you pause, take a breath, and smile inwardly. You remind yourself, "I am here. I am alive. I deserve care." Only then do you continue. This tiny shift changes the energy of the moment. The sound no longer drags you into restlessness. It brings you back to gentleness. Each pause creates space in your nervous system. Modern life is often filled with constant stimulation, leaving little room to breathe. By turning sounds into bells of mindfulness, you interrupt the cycle of reactivity. A single breath, taken with awareness, lowers stress, calms the mind, and signals safety to the body. Over time, these pauses accumulate, creating a baseline of calmness and compassion woven into the fabric of your day. This practice also reshapes your relationship with time. The chime of a clock can feel like pressure, a reminder that hours are slipping away. But when you hear it as a bell of mindfulness, it becomes a reminder, not of urgency, but of presence. Instead of thinking, "I am behind," you say, "This moment is mine to live fully." Time shifts from enemy to companion, guiding you gently instead of chasing you harshly. Another dimension of this practice is its ability to transform annoyance into care. Sounds like traffic noise, alarms, or interruptions can feel irritating, but when reframed as bells of mindfulness, they become opportunities to breathe and return. Even unpleasant sounds can be turned into reminders of compassion. This does not mean you deny frustration, but you use it as a bridge back to presence. In this way, the external world becomes a teacher rather than a distraction. The bell of mindfulness also strengthens the habit of self-love. Each time you pause and breathe in response to a sound, you are telling yourself, "I matter enough to stop." This simple act builds trust within. Over time, your inner self begins to believe the message that you are cared for, that you will not be abandoned in busyness, that your well-being is important. This trust becomes a foundation for deeper healing. Scientific studies affirm the power of micro-pauses. Research shows that even short breaks of mindful breathing reduce cortisol, improve focus, and enhance emotional regulation. The bell of mindfulness harnesses this science by embedding these pauses into daily life. You do not need extra hours to practice. The world itself provides cues if you are willing to hear them. To cultivate this habit, you can choose a specific sound as your bell. It might be your phone's notification, set to a soft chime. Each time it rings, instead of reacting instantly, you take one conscious breath. Or you might use the sound of birds outside, the hum of an appliance, or even your own footsteps. By choosing intentionally, you create a network of reminders scattered throughout the day, each one pulling you back to compassion. You can also practice this communally. When eating with others, the sound of utensils clinking can become a shared bell, prompting everyone to pause and breathe before continuing. In a workplace, the start of a meeting can be treated as a bell, one breath taken together before speaking. These shared practices create a culture of gentleness, showing that mindfulness is not only private, but also collective. On a deeper level, the bell of mindfulness symbolizes awakening. Every sound can be a call to remember what matters: presence, compassion, and care. This perspective shifts life itself. Instead of being pulled endlessly by noise, you begin to see each moment as a reminder that you are alive, that you have the choice to be kind to yourself now, not later. This practice also dismantles the idea that self-care requires isolation or retreat. While silence has its place, the bell of mindfulness teaches that daily life itself is the retreat. Ordinary sounds become sacred when met with awareness. You do not need to escape the world to find peace. You need only to listen differently. Over time, the bell of mindfulness rewires your response to stress. Instead of reacting with tension, you learn to pause automatically. The sound of an email arriving no longer spikes anxiety, it prompts a breath. The ring of a phone no longer pulls you into urgency, it invites presence. This transformation is subtle but profound, turning daily stresses into pathways of compassion. Ultimately, the bell of mindfulness teaches that the world itself is always calling you back to care. Every sound, from the softest chime to the loudest alarm, can be reframed as a reminder to return home to yourself. And each time you answer, each time you breathe, you reinforce the truth that self-compassion does not wait for special moments. It lives in the very fabric of your day, carried on the sound of ordinary life. Every sound that brings you back to yourself becomes a reminder that care does not have to wait for the perfect conditions. The bell of mindfulness teaches that even in the noise of life, you can pause and return to gentleness. But awareness alone is not enough if your life remains flooded with demands, obligations, or relationships that erode your well-being. Presence must be paired with protection. This is where compassionate boundaries arise, not as walls of rejection, but as expressions of non-harming, a way of practicing ahimsa toward yourself as much as toward others. Boundaries are often misunderstood as selfishness. You may fear that saying no means letting others down, or that protecting your energy means you are unkind. Yet, from a Buddhist perspective, true compassion cannot flourish if it comes at the cost of harming yourself. Ahimsa, the principle of non-violence, is not only about refraining from hurting others, but also about refusing to participate in the subtle violence of self-neglect. Boundaries are how you embody this truth in daily life. The first step in compassionate boundaries is recognizing harm. Harm is not only loud or dramatic, it can be quiet and cumulative. Staying in conversations that drain you, saying yes when your body aches for rest, tolerating criticism without defense, all of these plant seeds of suffering. By practicing mindfulness, you begin to notice these patterns. You ask, is this interaction nourishing me, or is it harming me? Awareness reveals where boundaries are needed. Once recognized, the challenge becomes giving yourself permission. Many people believe compassion means endless giving, but Buddhism teaches the middle way. Compassion without boundaries leads to depletion, while boundaries without compassion harden into isolation. The balance is to set limits not with anger but with care for yourself and for others. When you say no kindly, you prevent harm on both sides. You protect yourself from exhaustion, and you prevent others from depending on resentment or false generosity. Setting boundaries is also a way of honoring impermanence. Your energy, time, and attention are not infinite. They change with circumstances. To pretend otherwise is to cling to an illusion. By setting boundaries, you acknowledge reality. You accept that you cannot do everything or please everyone, and you choose wisely how to direct your limited resources. This is not failure, it is wisdom. Compassionate boundaries also heal the nervous system. When you constantly override your needs to meet others' expectations, your body remains in stress. You live in tension, always anticipating the next demand. By practicing boundaries, you signal safety to your body. You say, I will not push you beyond what you can bear. Over time, this builds trust within, allowing you to rest more deeply and act from strength rather than survival. Another dimension is clarity in communication. Boundaries are not only internal decisions, they must be expressed. Practicing right speech inwardly prepares you to practice it outwardly. You can say, with calmness, I cannot take this on right now, or I need some quiet, or this way of speaking hurts me. These words are not weapons, they are bridges. They create transparency and prevent silent resentment from growing. Boundaries also protect joy. Without them, your days may fill with obligations that leave no space for what nourishes you: creativity, rest, connection, play. Setting limits opens room for these essential experiences. It is not indulgence. It is cultivating the conditions for a balanced life. Joy is not optional on the path. It is the energy that sustains compassion long-term. Scientific research confirms this. Studies on burnout show that lack of boundaries is one of the strongest predictors of exhaustion. People who learn to set clear, compassionate limits maintain higher levels of resilience and satisfaction. The data echoes the Dharma. Non-harming must include yourself if you wish to serve others sustainably. Practical exercises can support this practice. Begin by journaling about situations where you often feel drained or resentful. These are clues that a boundary is needed. Then, write down compassionate phrases you could use to express the limit. Practice saying them out loud until they feel natural. By preparing in this way, you train yourself to respond with calmness instead of avoidance or explosion. Meditation can also help. During practice, visualize yourself surrounded by a field of light. This field represents your compassionate boundary. It does not block love, but it filters out harm. When you encounter difficult situations, recall this image. Let it remind you that boundaries are not barriers, but spaces of safety where compassion can thrive. Another step is practicing small boundaries daily. You might set aside 10 minutes of silence before checking messages or decline an invitation when your body craves rest. Each small act reinforces the truth that your well-being matters. Over time, you build confidence to set larger boundaries in relationships or work. Compassionate boundaries also reshape how you see giving. Without limits, giving becomes sacrifice that breeds resentment. With boundaries, giving becomes choice that springs from genuine care. The difference is profound. When you know you can say no, your yes becomes authentic, not forced. This authenticity strengthens trust in relationships because others can feel the clarity behind your choices. On a deeper level, boundaries align with the Bodhisattva vow. To relieve suffering, you must include yourself in the circle of compassion. If you burn out, your ability to serve others diminishes. By protecting your energy, you ensure that compassion remains sustainable, steady, and rooted in joy rather than obligation. Ultimately, compassionate boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but doors that open only when it is healthy to do so. They are expressions of ahimsa, refusals to participate in harm, whether to yourself or to others. Each time you set a boundary with kindness, you affirm the truth that your life is sacred, that your energy is precious, and that compassion must begin at home before it can ripple outward. This is the heart of boundaries as non-harming, to honor your limits not as weakness but as wisdom, to say no when necessary so that your yes carries truth, and to protect the conditions where love and presence can flourish. By practicing this, you live the middle way, not in self-denial, not in self-indulgence, but in the balanced compassion that allows both you and others to thrive. When you begin to honor your own limits as sacred through compassionate boundaries, life becomes less about depletion and more about balance. You no longer confuse sacrifice with love, and you start to see that protecting your own well-being is not a betrayal of compassion, but its deepest expression. Yet boundaries are not the end of the journey. They create the conditions for something more profound. Once space is cleared, the question arises: how do you relate to yourself in a way that heals the roots of suffering rather than simply managing its symptoms? This is where the Buddha's Four Noble Truths can be reimagined, not as distant philosophy, but as a mirror for the relationship you hold with yourself. The Four Noble Truths traditionally describe the nature of suffering, its causes, its cessation, and the path to freedom. But when applied inwardly, they illuminate the dynamics of self-neglect, self-criticism, and the possibility of self-compassion. The first truth shows you how suffering arises in the way you treat yourself. The second reveals the origins of harshness and why it repeats. The third offers the hope that these patterns can cease. And the fourth points to a practical path where self-love is cultivated as a living practice rather than an abstract idea. The first truth, suffering, becomes clear when you look at the subtle ways you harm yourself daily. The sting of inner criticism, the exhaustion of overextending, the loneliness of ignoring your own needs. These are not minor inconveniences, but genuine forms of dukkha. Acknowledging them is the beginning. Too often, people dismiss their own pain as unworthy compared to others. But the first truth insists: suffering is real, and it includes yours. Until you recognize this, healing cannot begin. The second truth, origin, asks you to trace where this suffering comes from. In self-relationship, the roots are often clinging to old stories, attachments to impossible ideals, and identification with harsh voices inherited from the past. Perhaps you absorbed criticism from family, comparison from culture, or perfectionism from fear of rejection. These forces become habits of mind, repeating automatically. Seeing their origin does not mean blaming yourself. It means understanding that self-neglect has causes, and what has causes can be released. The third truth, cessation, brings hope. Just as suffering has causes, it also has an end. This does not mean you will never struggle again, but that the cycle of self-harm can be interrupted. When you learn to loosen old stories, when you choose compassion over punishment, when you rest instead of driving yourself past exhaustion, suffering begins to dissolve. Cessation in this sense is not a dramatic moment of enlightenment, but the quiet freedom of no longer being your own enemy. The fourth truth, the path, is where practice becomes alive. Applied to self-relationship, this path is about cultivating habits that nurture instead of harm. Mindfulness, right speech turned inward, compassion in action, balance in effort, all become tools for walking a middle way with yourself. Each practice reinforces the message, I am included in compassion. The path is not linear, and it does not demand perfection. It is walked one step at a time, each choice an opportunity to water the seeds of kindness rather than cruelty. Seen through this lens, the Four Noble Truths become not only a map for spiritual liberation, but also a guide for healing self-neglect. They remind you that suffering is real and deserves acknowledgement, that it has causes which can be understood, that it can cease, and that there is a way forward. By reframing the truths in this way, you discover that the wisdom of the Buddha applies not only to lofty ideals, but also to the simple, daily work of learning to love yourself. This reframing is not theoretical, it changes how you live each day. When criticism rises, you recall the first truth. This is suffering. Instead of dismissing it, you acknowledge it. When you notice its roots in old patterns, you recall the second truth. This has origins, and I do not need to keep feeding them. When you pause and offer compassion, you experience the third truth. This suffering can ease. And when you practice daily mindfulness, boundaries, and kindness, you embody the fourth truth. This is the path of healing. By applying the Four Noble Truths inwardly, you turn a universal teaching into personal medicine. The philosophy becomes intimate, showing you not only how to face the world, but how to face yourself with gentleness. And in doing so, you discover that the end of self-neglect is not just possible, it is already beginning in the moments you choose compassion over harm. Reframing the Four Noble Truths through the way you relate to yourself shows that healing self-neglect is not only possible but part of the very path to freedom. You see that suffering is real, that it has causes, that it can be eased, and that there is a way forward. Yet for these insights to take root, they must be lived in tangible ways. One of the most overlooked yet powerful practices is generosity dana. While it is often spoken of as giving to others, its spirit can also be turned inward. When you learn to give to yourself with the same openness you extend to others, rest, nourishment, and joy become acts of profound generosity. Directing generosity inward begins with redefining what it means to give. Many think of generosity only in terms of money or material gifts, but in Buddhism it is broader. It is the willingness to offer what supports life, eases suffering, and brings joy. Applied inwardly, it means recognizing your own needs as worthy of care. To rest when tired, to nourish your body with food that sustains, to allow yourself joy without guilt, these become acts of dana. They are not indulgences but gifts you continually offer to the being you live with most closely, yourself. The first step is granting yourself permission. For many, self-neglect arises from the belief that care must always go outward, that giving to oneself is selfish. But this belief ignores the truth that your well-being is the ground on which your compassion for others stands. If you are exhausted, starved of joy, or empty of energy, your giving outward will be thin, forced, or resentful. By practicing inward generosity, you replenish the source from which outer generosity flows. Rest is one of the most essential gifts. In a culture that glorifies productivity, rest is often treated as laziness. Yet, from the perspective of dana, rest is generosity to body and mind. It is the offering of space to recover, to breathe, to renew. Without it, you deplete yourself until even the simplest tasks feel heavy. To lie down without guilt, to pause between tasks, to allow yourself a night of deep sleep. These are not trivial but profound acts of kindness that honor the truth of your impermanence and vulnerability. Nourishment is another form of dana. This includes not only food, but also everything that sustains your inner and outer life. To choose meals that bring both health and enjoyment, to drink water when thirsty, to feed your mind with uplifting words instead of constant criticism, these are ways of giving generously to yourself. Nourishment means refusing to treat your body and mind as machines to be driven until they break. It means recognizing them as sacred vessels, deserving of care. Joy, too, is generosity. Many people deny themselves joy, believing it must be earned by perfection or achievement. But joy is not a luxury, it is nourishment for the heart. To let yourself smile at music, to walk in nature without agenda, to savor a simple meal, to laugh with a friend, these are not distractions from the path but part of it. Joy strengthens resilience and makes compassion sustainable. Offering joy to yourself is like watering a garden. It ensures that your inner world remains vibrant and alive. Scientific studies support this wisdom. Research shows that adequate rest improves memory, mood, and immune function. Balanced nourishment supports mental health, and regular experiences of joy increase resilience and longevity. In this sense, dana directed inward is not only spiritual but also biological. By caring for yourself, you create conditions for well-being that ripple into every aspect of life. Practices can help cultivate this form of generosity. Begin by reflecting daily. What can I give myself today that will support life and ease suffering? It may be something simple, 10 minutes of stillness, a nourishing meal, a walk outside. By asking this question regularly, you train yourself to recognize needs and respond with care. Another practice is to pause before giving to others and ask, am I giving from fullness or depletion? If from depletion, offer something to yourself first. This ensures your generosity outward is authentic and sustainable. Meditation can also be shaped around this practice. As you breathe, silently offer yourself phrases, may I be rested, may I be nourished, may I know joy. With each inhale, imagine receiving these gifts. With each exhale, imagine releasing guilt or resistance. Over time, this meditation rewires your relationship with self-care, making generosity toward yourself feel natural rather than selfish. On a deeper level, dana inwardly dismantles the cycle of self-punishment. Harshness often convinces you that you do not deserve care, that you must earn it. Generosity interrupts this cycle by giving freely, without condition. You do not need to be perfect to rest, to eat, to smile. You deserve these gifts simply because you are alive. This truth, repeated through practice, erodes the foundation of self-criticism and replaces it with trust. Generosity inward also transforms relationships. When you are nourished, rested, and joyful, your presence with others changes. You give not from obligation, but from abundance. You can listen without resentment, care without exhaustion, love without fear of depletion. In this way, dana directed inward does not isolate you. It strengthens your ability to serve. Ultimately, dana inwardly is about remembering that you are also a recipient of compassion. The same care you would extend to a loved one in need is the care you must also extend to yourself. Rest, nourishment, and joy are not indulgences but sacred offerings, reminders that your life is worthy of kindness. By practicing this generosity daily, you transform self-care from occasional relief into a constant rhythm of compassion, sustaining both yourself and the love you share with the world. When generosity is finally directed inward, rest, nourishment, and joy stop feeling like luxuries and begin to reveal themselves as essential forms of love. You learn that caring for yourself is not selfish, but a natural extension of compassion, a way of keeping your heart alive and your energy steady. Yet, even as you practice giving freely to yourself, there may still linger the silent weight of impossible standards, the demand to be flawless, to embody the perfect self, and to live up to ideals that were never real to begin with. These standards are heavy because they feel solid, unquestionable, permanent. The Heart Sutra offers a path of release through its most famous teaching. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. This phrase is often recited but rarely allowed to touch the heart where perfectionism hides. To understand it inwardly is to recognize that the image of a perfect self you chase has no inherent existence. It is empty not in the sense of worthless, but in the sense of lacking fixed, independent reality. The harsh standards you impose on yourself are built from thoughts, cultural pressures, memories, and comparisons. When you look closely, you see that there is no permanent, perfect self waiting for you to become it. There is only the process of living, changing, unfolding. Releasing the illusion of the perfect self begins with seeing how tightly it grips your daily life. The thought that you must always perform better, look better, achieve more, these are forms you mistake as solid truth. But emptiness reveals their fluidity. Standards change across time, across cultures, across circumstances. What seemed essential yesterday may dissolve tomorrow. By recognizing their emptiness, you free yourself from treating them as ultimate measures of worth. At the same time, the teaching "emptiness is form" prevents emptiness from becoming nihilism. It reminds you that while these standards are empty of inherent reality, they still appear and affect your experience. They are not to be denied, but to be understood as transient. You can engage with goals and values, but without clinging to them as ultimate truth. This balance allows you to live fully without being enslaved by harsh ideals. The first layer of this practice is noticing how harsh standards arise in thought. When you hear the inner voice saying, "I must never fail," pause and ask, what is the form of this thought? Where does it come from? By tracing its origin, you see it is constructed from memory or external expectation, not from some eternal law. In that seeing, the weight of the thought begins to dissolve. Another layer is examining the consequences of clinging to these standards. When you attach your worth to perfection, every mistake becomes unbearable, every imperfection proof of inadequacy. This cycle creates endless suffering. The Heart Sutra invites you to loosen the grip. By recognizing the emptiness of the perfect self, you begin to see mistakes as natural expressions of impermanence, not as violations of an impossible standard. Meditation deepens this insight. Sit quietly and observe the body. Notice sensations arising and fading, no fixed form remains. Observe thoughts appearing, dissolving, replaced by others. Ask yourself, where is the solid self that must be perfect? Each time you search, you find only emptiness, only changing conditions. Yet in this emptiness, life continues, breath flows, awareness remains. This direct experience embodies the teaching: form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Scientific understanding supports this. Psychology shows that identity is fluid, shaped by environment and context. Neuroscience reveals that the brain itself is plastic, constantly rewiring. These findings echo the Heart Sutra's teaching. There is no fixed self. The standards you cling to are projections onto a self that is always shifting. When you see this clearly, the pressure to meet impossible ideals loosens. This insight also transforms compassion. When you stop demanding perfection of yourself, you stop demanding it of others. You see their struggles as conditions, not as failures of an unchangeable essence. This softens judgment and fosters empathy. The same liberation you give yourself extends outward, creating relationships rooted in acceptance rather than comparison. On a practical level, you can bring the Heart Sutra into daily life by reframing moments of self-criticism. When you think, "I should always be strong," remind yourself, this is just a form, and forms are empty. When you feel inadequate, remember, the self I compare against is a construction, not a reality. By practicing these reminders, you gradually dismantle the illusion of harsh standards. The ultimate gift of this teaching is freedom. You are not bound to live under the tyranny of an imagined perfect self. You are free to live as a fluid, changing being, worthy of compassion in every form you take. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Becomes not just a phrase, but a lived truth. Your imperfections are not proof of failure, but expressions of the same emptiness that makes growth, change, and compassion possible. In this way, the Heart Sutra becomes medicine for perfectionism. It teaches you to release the illusion of harsh standards, to rest in the openness of non-fixed identity, and to embrace yourself as worthy, not because you are flawless, but because you are alive. The liberation it offers is not abstract. It is the daily relief of no longer chasing what was never real. And in that release, self-love flows naturally, unburdened by impossible demands. As your eyes grow heavy and your breath softens, let the journey you've taken through these Buddhist lessons rest gently in your heart. You've walked the middle path between harshness and indulgence, learned patience as a form of tenderness, embraced impermanence as a release from labels, and turned compassion inward like a healing light. You've discovered that the demons you once feared can be befriended, that each sound can call you back to care, that boundaries can protect rather than divide, and that generosity, rest, and joy are gifts you are allowed to give yourself. From the Heart Sutra's freedom from perfection to the Four Noble Truths reframed as a guide for self-relationship, to the lotus rising from the mud of struggle, every teaching points back to one truth. You are already worthy of love, just as you are in this very moment. These are not distant philosophies, but daily practices, steps you can take to live more gently, more fully, and more at peace with yourself. If these lessons touched you tonight, I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments which teaching spoke to your heart most deeply, or which practice you feel ready to try in your own life. Your reflections might be the encouragement someone else needs to begin their own path of gentle self-love. And if you want to continue this journey growing calmer, kinder, and stronger with every lesson, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. Together, we'll keep walking this path of wisdom and compassion, one gentle step at a time.